I'll call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is to answer any questions based on the budget workshop of January 24th, 2018. So does anyone have additional questions on the sustained budget that we went over?
I just missed the agenda. Did it get emailed?
Yes.
Actually, before we do that, could I go through this, because I think it might answer some potential
questions
additional
that-
questions. So if I could go through the presentation, it's very short.
Is there a way we can get some agendas? Just for those that may not have them. I'd appreciate it. Thanks so much. Okay.
Got it.
All right, so just very quickly, like we did last year, there were questions that came from the board, as well as we did a survey, put it out to staff as well as families. So these are some of the high level questions that came forward that I just want to share with everyone. First of all, there was a question about Versatrans. What is Versatrans? Versatrans is the transportation software that we use to create the routes, to make sure that we have the proper loads. That is a vital tool in the transportation department, is an essential tool to make that work for our district in terms of transportation for our students by buses. The MyStop software, first of all, is part of the strategic plan. It's a recommended part of the strategic plan. It's not part of the sustained services budget. That's an additional add-on to Versatrans that offers parents access to information about where the bus is on the route, so that if there's parents running late, or they might not be home, or they have daycare or aftercare providers, it gives that opportunity for families to have that additional resource. Again, it's a strategic plan item, so I know there's a lot of people, we put it in there, because remember, we have steering committees that are made up of more than just us as administrative teams. They're made up of parents, teachers, administrators, students, so we try to take in the response to all of those ideas. Do some of them move forward financially or get invested in? Oftentimes not, unfortunately, because of the financial situations. But again, we want to honor the hard work and volunteerism on the part of these individuals. And it is something that's happening in other districts. It's not happening, it's not like this is something new for transportation. School resource officer, again, this slide just shares with you some of the value adds of a school resource officer. Answers some questions regarding the resource officers. I'm not going to read it to everyone, but the fact is that we are one of the few school districts in our DIRG, as well as in the state, that still do not have resource officers. I do want to report to the Board of Education tonight and to the public that I did reach out to the chief. As I said, we've been in constant communication. At this time, while he plans to request additional staff in the force, he could not guarantee that they would be allocated for school resource officers. So I think, again, we heard very clearly from the community and the board last year that school resource officers really are something that should be outside the purview of the Board of Education budget. And so therefore, they would be the responsibility of the town or of the police department, but they wouldn't be necessarily our responsibility. So again, when we look at our strategic plan and we look at our prioritization, that would be an item that when we come to that conversation tonight, that most likely would come off of our list, because again, I think it was the decision of the board last year that it was a town responsibility. I think the police chief thought it was also, but we put it on the budget, on the plan, just to keep it as an item for conversation. Last week, there was a question about magnet school enrollment and our 3-year trend data. So I just wanted to give you the update on this. We have right now a new 3-year average of 51 presently for Wintergreen. We pay for 55 seats, or I shouldn't say we pay for seats that we fill, but we have in our budget 55. Now I want to explain Thomas Edison, we have 17 3-year average, and we put in our budget 19. We could reduce these to the 3-year average. I just want to be cautionary on this, because the fact is we do get between 3 and 4 students every year during the school year that come in from other districts that were responsible for having them continue at Wintergreen or at Thames. So I know we just got a call recently about a family that's moving into Wallingford. Their child is presently at one of these 2 schools. we have an agreement that, and this is not uncommon, it's not a Wallingford agreement solely, but that we honor the fact that the student would continue at that school, and then we get the remainder of the tuition for that student for the rest of the year. Similarly, if students leave Wallingford and go to another bordering town, those towns pay for that student for the rest of the year if they are attending Wintergreen or Thames. So we could, looking at this, we could cut approximately 6 tuitions if the board chose to do that, and we can give you additional information on the cost savings as we move forward. But I just wanted to give you the data that was requested last Wednesday. Open Choice. I had a conversation with Lynn Bailey, who is the director of Open Choice through ACES. This question came up last week regarding Open Choice. Presently, we have 6 students at Open Choice. Those are at the high school level because we're graduating students out of the system. At present time, and this is purely informational, we can go further with this conversation if there's a desire on the part of the board. There's a reimbursement of $3,000 per student. There is a bonus that if you have more than 10 students in a single school, you receive a bonus, but that's not a set number every year. It's depending on how many spaces are left open at the end of the year. They have a certain amount that they are budgeted for from the state level, and say they have 100 students that they're supposed to place and they only have 70, then the money that would have been allocated for those additional 30 would be divided across all the schools that have been part of Open Choice that year. So that number fluctuates. So we could look at the 3,000 truly as a rule of thumb. Money needs to be used in district to purchase materials or develop programs. So it could be used for staff. The difference that I would recommend if we were to look at this again, we wouldn't give the money like we had in the past to the building principals to use in their own way. It would be a district funds to offset expenditures, because this would be seen as an opportunity to relieve expenses in the district, not buy things that were additional items. We'll be looking at to supplant, not supplement. The money must be used for academic items only, and there is a new statutory change that just occurred that allows special ed funds to be allocated back from, in this case, New Haven to the district at the percentage of which the service is being used. So for example, if there are, just for easy math, there's a resource teacher who has a resource class of 20 students, 10 of them are from Open Choice background, we would receive 50% of that teacher's salary from, in this case, New Haven Public Schools. That was not the case, and when I spoke to Lynn, Mrs. Bailey today with Dominic, she said that has been clarified and that the state is supporting districts in collecting those resources from New Haven to benefit students with special needs. You could only get, of course, the prorated rate. You don't get the whole teacher, but the portion for which there are the same number of, or there are a number of students that are receiving that service. So I just wanted to share this information with you.
Can
Yep, ask.
should we ask questions?
Sure.
Or should we?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so well, I have two questions. So I need to go over, could you go over again that 10+ open choice students in a school, but if they're not filled scenario?
Yes, it's
that,
not.
And also I want to ask, well, okay, let's start there.
So first, the not filled is at the state level, not in the district level. So, so for example, let's just pick a school, Parker
Okay,
Farms.
sure.
We know that that's where there's an enrollment decrease. Say we wanted to try to raise the level of those classes. Say the school took 20 open choice students.
Okay.
They all were there. That's above 10.
Okay.
So in addition to the $3,000 per student, when Open Choice as a group, when all the districts put in the number of students that they collectively were able to accommodate from New Haven, and then Open Choice, ACES runs Open Choice. They look at the total amount of money from the state of Connecticut that was given to subsidize Open Choice students. If there's any money left over, because not all districts filled the seats, then they would divide that up equitably across those schools.
So historically, has there been an
Yes.
excess? Like, what are we talking about roughly? Roughly, I know
Well, this
it
was
could
10 years
change.
ago, so I would not.
Okay.
She did not want me to quote a number,
Okay.
so I would not do that.
And so the other thing that perked my ears, which is a huge departure,
was special ed.
is the special ed reimbursable piece. So it begs the question, is this something as a board, should we, I guess I would ask of, I know there's some administrators, and I'm not looking to put anybody on the spot, but is this something that we would want to reconsider our position on this? And maybe not, but there's the rules have changed.
We had an administrative council meeting this afternoon, and I did share with all the administrators who were present, which was all of them, that this was something I shared with them, this presentation, actually, so they knew what was going to be happening this evening. And I said that, depending on the board, I would ask for you to give me direction, the team direction, to go back to them, because this wouldn't be at every school. We certainly wouldn't
understand.
start at high school. I want to make that clear. High school
Okay.
would not be the grade level to start it at, because
I was thinking elementary, no?
elementary,
Youngest?
potentially 6th grade.
Oh,
But because talking to Miss Bailey again from ACES, who's in charge of the program, she said high school is not the best place to start it because of the fact that the students have already established the connections with their school districts. So yes, you look at your elementary. I guess the thing that we'd want to look at is we have to balance in terms of class size, which I'm going to get to that slide in a few, as to where you feel comfortable in that relation.
so I guess I would just say to the board as a placeholder, I wouldn't mind putting this as a placeholder of consideration as a revenue source potentially. I don't know how any board members feel about that, or
Mrs.
I don't know if
Costelli, did you?
I don't
Yeah,
even know if revenue source. Yeah,
Well,
it
I
is a
think
revenue.
I guess
don't know
I
if
would just
say that
caution.
correctly.
Yeah, I would be.
I'm not sure I like that approach.
Yeah, I would be cautious with that.
Just
I
as
think
a shift in terms of, I guess, what our student body looks like might be a better approach.
I think that the diversity has always been a value-added aspect of
Right,
this.
and we
adding
obviously in our own town provide a degree of that significantly, so that's good.
But in some places, there could be increased opportunities. I do also want to make certain, though, that I do share one other point, that the board would have to decide, because enrollment starts March 1st, so forms go out to school districts this March 1st to decide to start enrolling kids. So we would have to make a decision and then stand behind that decision prior to March 1st.
Mrs. Costelli and then Mrs. Costelli.
So given the state of the state and the debacle we're in financially, I'm surprised that the state would still be willing to
That's a good point.
share that wealth of those unused positions with the districts as opposed to putting it back in their own coffers. Is there any,
Well, that's why there was no
Liabi-
number provided in terms of bonus money. So the 3,000 is statutory because it's
Right.
a settlement for Sheff versus O'Neill
Right.
and the desegregation of our urban settings. The bonus money, she was not willing to commit to that because wasn't stated, but I think you might be on to a really good reason why that additional funds, like we're finding in a lot of state budgets, have been taken back for other resources and other purposes.
Right. Okay.
So I wouldn't.
I don't
That's
wanna- I
why
don't wanna put that
the
as,
3,000. I think she kept stating
Yeah.
over and over was the number that we should go with. If there's additional money, that's fantastic. But
not to count
the
on?
3,000.
Okay.
Mrs. Corso?
Just curious if Lynn Bailey speaks to Board of Ed members about the advantages of her program, if we could get her here and talk to us about it before we
Sure.
decide whether or not it's something we want to bring back in.
I could ask her to be here Wednesday night because we really do need to make a decision according to, our moving forward. So I can call her if that's something that all the board would like to take consensus on. Us asking Miss Bailey to come Wednesday evening if possible.
Mrs. Purcell?
I just want to ask why the board decided to diminish the program in the first place. Because what the reasoning was. I just know as a teacher in the district, some of those students had a really hard time being in our schools sometimes, socially.
Well, I think that some board members, I don't know if board members who are on the board want to start with the response to that.
Sure. I actually asked Sal the same question a few days ago, because I said, you have to refresh my memory. And as soon as he started talking, I said, oh yeah, I remember. So it definitely was a financial impact at the time. With respect to, because of the increased enrollment, it was tipping the scales where we would, in order to keep our class sizes where we wanted them, we were then going to have to hire more teachers. And that was a dramatic impact to the budget. So that was a major reason for the decision that we made at that time. I don't remember if there were other reasons as well, if anybody else
Correct. I
remembers.
think the special ed costs.
Special ed was the factor.
Oh, it's special ed, right,
Yeah,
right.
that was the major factor,
Yep.
frankly,
Yeah.
was
Yep.
special ed.
It was a combination because we were looking at the class sizes that were teetering, and I think that's why we're on the opposite
Yeah.
end of that spectrum right now. We have class sizes that are teetering low
I don't mean to
rather than
usurp that.
teetering high.
Yeah, and I don't mean to usurp Mike,
No.
but that, to answer your question, Patty, it was really, we saw, see, that's what piqued my interest, was the fact that the special ed costs are reimbursable. That wasn't the case before. So we were absorbing the special ed costs of these students. It became cost prohibitive. So that's the difference. So that's a great question. Again, I'm sorry to usurp you, Mike, but I just wanted to clarify.
And-
That was my interest when I saw that the fact that those special ed costs are reimbursable, that was important to me.
And just one thing, I just want to clarify that it wasn't that we couldn't, the statute did support us getting the reimbursement, is that districts just weren't getting it. We were requesting it. Well, I just wanted, because just in case
Yeah,
Ms.
okay.
Bailey does come and she's able to attend a meeting, I don't
Good
want
point
to have anybody believe that that wasn't in the law, but it was just that we were having, all the districts were having very challenging times getting that. That recently changed because of a circumstance that occurred in another district. And that's why it's changed, and she brought that to our attention today when I was on the phone and Dominic was there. And then, so there was a circumstance that had to rise to a higher level to make a decision that everybody had to stick with.
Mr. Votto?
The whole purpose of this program is to bring diversity
Correct.
to our town, as well as provide an opportunity for other children to, I think that's the benefit. I don't
Correct.
think it goes beyond that. I mean, I don't think we want to get into with all due respect, I don't think we want to say, well, because it generates revenue. I mean, that's the wrong reason to do it. But I can understand why we would think that at first, especially with the special ed, because that was a problem before, and that this would certainly fix the problem. But I also think we have to think of the whole picture. I think Roxanne even said this. We have a very diversified group of people already in this town, so I think we benefit. There's cultural diversity in our town, great deal. So I think we meet that standard in some way, shape, or form. I think it's a wonderful idea, but I think Patty, there's so many things, pros and cons. I think Patty brings up a very good point. You know, I don't know who makes the choice to send children here. Is it just New Haven that would decide? Do we have any say in that? I forgot how that
We
works.
do not have.
You know, there are some kids who do adjust, have a problem adjusting. Others adjust very well, and I think it's a very good opportunity. But again, there's other factors you have to consider. And the other factor we do have to consider is, you know, our numbers. And can we afford to do this as far as, do we have to increase teachers in a particular grade level? How do you say no to somebody? Oh, wait a minute, we already reached 27 kids in this class, we have to say no to you. You know, there's a lot of little things you have to think about. So I really think we have to, I don't know what to do at this point, but I think we have to just think about it. It's not an easy decision to make.
Mrs. McKay?
And Mike, to your point, the other factor that, you know, we have to think about, you know, the burden on our staffs. You know, that's a factor. I mean, you know, that's a burden potentially a burden to all our staff. So that's a factor too that, you know, to your point, is important to think about. So I'm not sure, I didn't mean to just like jump right in, but and I'm not sure I want somebody, I mean, we could consider, I don't know how I feel about having somebody come Wednesday. I don't want to waste somebody's time either, you know,
So I
that's my
guess
concern.
initially-
But it was a departure from our normal way of thinking, so it just struck me.
Sure.
And I don't want to, you know, I didn't mean to make a brouhaha about it either.
No,
if
I guess
am.
the question is, would be just as, and you could accept this or not, we could tweak it, you could change it any way you want. Would you want administration to first look at what recommendations for grade levels in schools that would, and then come back with how class size might be altered, the potential cost, if there is a cost?
I'm not looking to add a lot of work for people either. On the, I
As you
understand
know,
need-
we already probably
Yeah, you're in the
started working
mode.
on
Yeah,
that.
I know, you're in the
So-
mode. I mean, I guess I would look for, I guess I would leave it in for me personally, I would look to say, I would look to you and your staff to say, what would be your recommendations?
And I
not
would say,
tonight, not tonight.
Well, and unfortunately, I have to say, I would say, this is your budget from this point
Yep.
forward, not ours. We already presented our budget. Our budget was a 1.99.
Yep,
We're happy with the 1.99. So if you want to go lower, because that's what this would end up doing, that's a
Mm-hmm.
decision of the board, not of this administration. So I would look
Gotcha.
for your direction as
okay.
9 members.
Well, then you answered my question.
Yep.
Actually, you just answered my question.
So
I'm good.
Mrs. Castelli?
Okay, now I'm really confused. Anyway, back to the special ed, that last bullet there, where it says prorated based on percentage of open choice students receiving services.
correct.
So if there's one student in a classroom, then
We get 1/20th
of the
or-
teacher's salary.
of the specialized service, not the
That's what
regular
I want.
classroom
Okay, because
teacher.
you use the teacher's salary as an example
Yeah.
only, but it's all of their service. So in other words, if this particular student really required, I don't know, $30,000 worth of services, we would get reimbursed.
Well, you would if that's the total cost, not the percentage. If that's the total cost for that student,
Yeah.
then you get 30,000 minus 3,000, so you would get 27,000.
We would get the 27.
27,000.
So all of
because
his
you said
costs.
total cost.
All
Yeah.
of his costs get,
That's the way
taken
that's exactly.
okay.
So
and
the
that's
thing
as-
is though, but
and
again,
that's as guaranteed as the 3,000? In other words, it's not
again,
something the
that's
state can pull the rug
that was
out
the
from under?
question. That's not the state. That's New Haven.
Oh, that's New
the-
Haven.
That's New
Oh.
Haven. So the thing is that, again, let me go back to the basic example. Say a teacher is $70,000, just to do an easy number. 50% of the students in that class are special needs. That teacher that's her caseload or his caseload. We would get $35,000 minus the 3, so it would be $32,000 from New Haven, not from the state. We get the 3 from the state, the 30, the
see,
29,000 from.
You're still
New Haven.
confusing me because you're using the teacher's salary as the example as opposed to the student's needs.
Well, because again, I'm saying it's a special ed student in a resource classroom. So there's one teacher. I'm just saying that they don't see speech language, they don't see social worker, a resource special education teacher who just has a caseload of
I'm
a certain
thinking
amount of
classroom
students.
teacher.
No,
Okay.
classroom teacher, there's no reimbursement for the classroom teacher except, again, the $3,000.
I'm sorry, that's where I was off. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Mrs. Purcell?
Who gets to decide what services they get? Because now New Haven would possibly be paying that money. Are they at the table to say, well, we don't believe they should get these services, and Wallingford says we do get these services?
The PPT, if the student is already into the PPT process, then obviously the IEP would come with the child. Most often, we start off the year with a PPT to review the services. Oftentimes, there is in past experiences, there have been New Haven staff there, especially, I'm assuming there would be, if they are going to be providing the funding for those services. But again, it goes back to the IEP. People can't just say, you're not getting them because we don't believe in them. It has to go back to the needs of the individual student and what's appropriate education for that student to make, have him or her make educational or emotional gains.
But aren't we responsible after that? If the child stays in the town of Wallingford.
If they move to Wallingford, then
No,
it
if they don't
becomes,
move.
yeah.
In other words, you said that their IEP follows them here.
Correct.
But once they're here, let's say they stay another year.
Correct.
Now, we have to provide the IEP, correct? We have the,
Yeah, because they're
provide
part of a
the services.
caseload. So there'd be a PPT annual review every year. New Haven could come to that annual review. They would probably want, again, to come to that annual review like we do with our outplacement students. They'd want to come to the annual review. They could give input. They can share ideas. But again, the IEP has to meet the students' needs and has to be appropriate for the students based on the services we could provide.
Mrs. Raccio?
What about the students who would be receiving intervention services that are identified as special needs, either literacy or math coaching from interventionists? Do we get reimbursed for
Not
those
for
services?
those, because intervention services are they're either a tiered tier 1, tier 2, potentially tier 2 most likely support. So those do not go on the IEP. If they're on the IEP, yes, but most often because the services aren't being delivered by a special education staff member, those would not be reimbursable. It would have to be from your certified special ed teacher, speech language pathologist, social worker, psychologist, OT, PT, occupational therapist, physical therapist, those professionals.
So depending upon how many students and where we would take the students, if the need was there, we may have to have increases that are burdened on the district to increase interventionists.
Potentially, depending, not knowing the profile of the students that may be attending.
Mrs. Corso?
I just want to make a note, not all open choice students are special education
Correct.
students. And we could apply and receive 40 open choice students. 2 could be special education. So I don't think it's, I don't think we're doing our due diligence if we're making our decision based on special education alone, because the benefits from our district, as you said, Mr. Votto, the diversity that it brings into our district is important.
And to
important for
Ms.
our kids.
Corso's point, I did do an analysis over when we did have open choice students here, and less than 20%, 20, maybe a high of 25% of the students had special needs that were that we were addressing as a school district. So I do want to make that clear, and I appreciate you clarifying that also. Again, the purpose of this program is to be a reciprocal benefit, a benefit for our students, our staff, our parents, our community as a whole, as well as the students who are coming from another community. So I just, and I know that we all know that, but again, it's the timing of and the season of budget that we move into the monetary piece of things. And I know that this board has always led with its heart and being considerate for all backgrounds. So I don't want that to get lost. And again, as Ms. Corso said, we did look at the special ed numbers, the number of students who were coming, the services, and again, it was about 20% of the students, and that was when we were on a high of 109, I think.
Mrs. Castelli?
Is New Haven having, to your knowledge, is New Haven having difficulty filling all of their open choice requests? Are they able to place everybody that wants to go somewhere?
No, I believe there are. I believe there are still some students who would be available or would be desiring to go to another district.
And who decides which, the way this program works, do the students request the district they want to go to, or?
The district, but not the school.
The district, but not the school?
We set up the school so like we could specifically say Parker Farms 3rd grade, Moran 6th grade, Highland 1st grade. We specifically say that because we have to look at our enrollment and look at our projections. And I think that was the other factor, as was brought up earlier. I think when we first were reviewing this, we were at that tipping point on a lot of those classes. If we recall, 9 years ago now, some of our elementary classrooms were on the verge of much higher numbers, 26, 27. And of course, that was a concern at that point. And then we had other classes at 14.
Is there a minimum or maximum amount of students that
We
you...
set that.
Right. Do you have a number in mind?
Nope. I don't, I think
What's
that
your
we need.
question? I'm Karen, I'm not
she
sure what
wanted-
Is there a
question was.
minimum or maximum number of students that we could accommodate and
I think
does
we'd want to.
administration have a number in mind?
I think
Okay.
we'd want to look at that. I think it would be premature for me to share a number with you tonight because I don't know if we have consensus of the board as to whether or not that's direction to go. So I think once we have that direction, if there's consensus for us to bring back information about that, then we could delve deeper into it. I'd be lying to say that we haven't looked at it, started to look at it, because obviously we want to be proactive, and we also know the many hours, outside of budget that we have other responsibilities during this time of year. So we did look at this information, but again, we don't want to necessarily move forward if there's not, consensus to do so.
Other questions or remarks on this issue?
So what's the next step to move forward? If we don't have Lynn Bailey come and talk to us, what is the next step in moving forward?
Well, I think we have to discuss amongst ourselves, is this something that we want to pursue? Do we feel that this is a benefit to our students, having this population come and enrich our schools? Or do we see some downsides to this? And I think we need to discuss it as a board to see if we want to move forward with this. Mrs. McKay, did you have a?
Yeah, I would just add, for me, Erin, I wrote it down, so what I do through these budget workshops, this is just me, is if I see something that I want, I guess a place card holder is the best adjective I could use, that I would want to use as, I don't know, maybe I want to revisit it, maybe I don't, but I want to put a place card holder. So this, for me, might be a place card holder, if that makes sense. I'm not ready to pull the trigger. I probably won't. I don't know. I want to see more of the strategic plan and, other places, that I might want to jockey something on the budget. But for me right now, I'm not going to, it would be premature for me personally to say that. I want to spend more time on this, but I want to leave the door open. That would be my approach.
The other thing that I would suggest is that I think the guiding principle for moving into this decision has to be beyond the fact that we, of course, want to increase diversity experiences and grow relationships. But again, unfortunately, in the context or through the lens of the budget, is this seen as a savings, meaning that by having this money, it's reducing the 1.99?
Right.
Or is it a supplanting where it's bringing back staff that potentially would not have been brought,
Oh, that's a good point.
that would not have continued service with us because of the decreasing enrollment? So if we could get a handle on that, if there is a decision or any type of inclination on the board to hear what that would look like, I just would like to know if we could get a direction there, because it's more of and we could do both exercises if you'd like, but there are two different sides to this. If you're looking to say, just for arbitrary numbers, bring in 20 open choice students, is that deciding factor to take that $60,000 and reduce it from the 1.99, or is that to look potentially to bring back one of the staff members that would be reduced due to what we had discussed last week, the enrollment decrease?
Mr. Votto?
Where is that enrollment decrease on the elementary level?
It's predominantly at the elementary level. There are a couple of schools where, we have, across the board, we have about 12 elementary staff members. Due to the enrollment decrease, we shared, that was part of it. I could share with you, I have a slide coming up with what it would entail to get the class sizes to certain levels. But right now, our K2 board guideline is 21 students. Our 3-5 guideline is 24 students, or 23 students. So I just want to know that we could come back with maintaining those guidelines and share with you potential, opportunity for placement of students. Or we can go in the other direction, trying to, again, because we heard from public, reduce class size.
That's where I was going to go. I think it's unfortunate this subject has to come up during budget time. It's
But it's
be
hard.
interpreted wrong. But
Well, it's
what I'm trying to
difficult,
say
yeah.
is, I think we really need to know what our numbers are going to be like in our elementary classrooms. I would like to have a harder number before I make.
You have it in your budget book.
Well.
It's done by school, so everything is there. Yep.
But each.
And grade level.
All right.
It's in section 2. The challenge is, and I think you're bringing this up, Mike, is that there is not a good time to have this conversation, because if you have it in the spring, you might, first of all, the deadline is March 1st.
I know.
So the thing is that you're always going to be behind, because we don't know. We could say we're going to invite 30 students to our schools. We invite 5 to one particular grade level.
Right.
Over the summer,
Right,
20
the
kids
summer
move into
yeah,
that
that's the
school.
problem,
Now
summer.
we have to hire another teacher. We don't know. Or the conversely, you could have it where 20 school students leave and now you have plenty more space. So you don't know. It's tough. Enrollment, to be honest, like we know, October 1st report really means nothing anymore. A lot of movement occurs, as I showed you with the movement in and out of district. That occurs more frequently, and it's not just at certain times of the year. It's happening throughout the course of the year, and we're not alone in that. I've talked to a lot of districts in our DIRG. It's much more frequent. So I don't know if there's a good time ever, to be honest.
Mrs. Corso?
Is the March 1st deadline when the application opens to districts or when it's finalized and closed to districts?
Finalized and closed to districts.
And that's a hard set line.
I asked her that today, yeah. I said to her that we would, if we made a decision, we would be submitting our budget to the mayor by March 1st, and most likely this would have to be either incorporated or not, and she said that March 1st is the deadline for us to fill out the paperwork. We get it every year, so we'd have to fill it out, and then we're committed to those spaces.
Okay.
So what is the group's pleasure? Do we want to think about this and come back to it a little bit later on? and-
I'm not ready to make a decision
Okay.
tonight.
Okay, we'll think about it and come back to it.
All right, another question that was asked about the career of a college and career specialist. They are not in the teachers union. They are a contracted employee. They are outside the teachers union because they work very different hours than our teachers. They do a lot of evening activities, Saturday activities that our teachers don't. So that would that is a very different, we have a flexible, much more flexible relationship and contract in that regard. High school department heads, this information was requested also. So we look at Lyman Hall. The difference here is that they have the ag science department head. Everything else is very similar. So you see the 17, 18 classes that they teach. You'll notice that art and music, they do not get a reduction in course load. They only get a stipend. So they do not get a reduction in course load. And everyone else next year will be increasing one class, as we said to you previously. But those are the stipends. The stipends are dependent on the size of the department. That's why there's different stipends. So it's number of staff members in the department. So if you have a large department, the stipend is larger. It's just a natural connection. Okay. Next, a question about administrators. This is actually just taken from last year, to be honest, except it's updated data. It's a continual question as to where we sit in terms of administrators. So we have building, middle school, high school, curriculum, adult education. And what you'll see to the far right-hand column is the number of evaluated by each administrator. So on average, you'll see those evaluations. And I know when we had previous board members on our team, they talked about how usually you try to stay 1 to 20. We do not have that happening anywhere in our system. So I just wanted to, again, share that data with you as a group. This is for special education. Again, there's 3 administrators, including the director in special education, and you'd have the staff there.
The department chairs aren't considered administrators.
Correct. They're not administrators. They do not evaluate. Just as a point of clarification, there was a question, and I think it was just a misunderstanding when the person people might have read the budget online. The dean of students, first of all, it says location. They were for elementary, not high school. There was a misunderstanding that high school was asking for another administrator. They're not. The elementary, we had talked about this last year, and also that this is not in this year's budget. It's in strategic plan for future years, not for this year. But I just wanted to clarify that because there were a couple of questions. So obviously, if you have a question a couple of times, it must be confusing. So I just wanted to clarify that for everyone.
And, if I may say, and that really speaks to, if you go back 2 slides to why we have so many administrators, if you look at the average number of being evaluated at the elementary, it's almost twice as many, you know?
Certified and non-certified, correct.
Right.
Teacher reduction. This is the one that I want you to take a look at, and this one is something that I will process a few times with you because I want to make sure that it's understood. Last week we heard and we discussed a little bit about the fact that we were reducing teachers because we had an enrollment decrease. In particular, the school that has had the largest enrollment decrease has been Parker Farms, where they're losing potentially 1 teacher per grade level. Still maintaining the average of no more than actually 22 students per class, 21.25 or 45. So it was within the board's guidelines. But this year they have, and if you go to your section 2, I believe they have about 17, 18 students per class in some areas. So if we want to talk about equity, I felt it was important to put the data out there and put it in financial terms for everyone. because it's easy to speak about these in generalities, but I think it's important to have the data. So if we were to look at students in K-5, and every classroom, K-5 having an average of 17 students, because that would be truly equal and equitable, we would need to add 33 teachers to our district at a cost of $2.2 million. So that, I'm just going through the chart with you as an informational point. If we wanted 18 students per classroom, K-5, we would add 22 teachers at the cost of $1.5 million. 19 students per classroom is a little over $1 million, and 20 students per classroom is $938,000. That does not account for additional paraeducators that would be needed, potentially furniture, fixture, equipment, materials, technology, and, as the elementary principals brought up right away, space. Because the fact is that the additional classrooms would be necessary. So what I wanted to do, and this is nothing more than the fact that I know it was a thoughtful conversation, and I know we all care very much about making certain that we're providing for our students. I thought it would be helpful to just share, if we truly look at equity across all grade levels, not just one school or two schools, that we look at this number and we see that this is what the implication would be on the budget. Does that make sense to everyone?
Well, yes and no.
Mrs. McKay?
So I understand what you're doing, and it makes sense, yes, but I guess I don't understand why we're lumping K-5 through 5.
Well, because the fact is,
because we would never have the same guidelines for
well, but the fact
K2,
is,
3, 5.
totally get what you're saying, but Parker Farms is a 3-5 school.
Correct.
So presently, the class sizes, if we were to maintain the staff that was requested to be maintained last week, next year, the 3-5 school would have classrooms of about 16, 17 students.
Which is so below our,
So just to follow through on that exercise,
Okay,
because
I see what
it
you're
was a
saying.
concern that we were raising class sizes and that we weren't going to be equitable opportunities. So just to follow that exercise forward, we wanted to make certain that we looked at this from, okay, if we can't just have one school have classes of 17, it's a 3-5 school.
I see what your mind's
So
saying.
now we need to look at
So
all
I
8
just-
schools,
so-
because that's not fair that a kindergartner might have
okay.
20 and a third grader has
Okay,
17.
now that you framed it up that way, I understand why you did what you did. But I want to make sure I understand, because my understanding of the reduction in staff does support the guidelines for a K2
Correct.
3-5 school, and
Correct.
we're not out of line
Correct.
for 21 or 23.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And we've never-
I want to make sure I'm
Correct.
I'm clear on that I'm
Absolutely, and I appreciate you clarifying that. We've never been out of guidelines.
I didn't think so, but
And actually, I appreciate one of our staff members, our administrators who's in the audience tonight, who always speaks up and says on behalf of elementary schools that when in doubt, if they come to us in August, and that's why we purposely pushed the class enrollment, the class lists till August, we add teachers. You know that. We come to you. We're posting. So we open it. We don't want to meet. We don't want to go above those guidelines, and we never have.
I take personal pride, and I think
Yeah.
board members that have been on this board for a long time know those guidelines, we've been rigid about maintaining them. And I can't say that necessarily about some of our surrounding towns, that they have been strict about maintaining those guidelines. And I think those are really, I think a lot of districts would drool over having guidelines that way, that we do add students in the summer. So as long as I know that these reductions that we're making, still all of our classrooms, K2, 3, 5, 21, 23, are being maintained, that's my concern.
Yes.
And you have validated that for me tonight, so that's
Correct.
important.
And I just
for
wanted,
me.
because it came up as questions with staff in the survey, and also, with staff in the survey, not with parents, but with staff, I wanted to make clear that this is what we would have to do also, because it's, again, I think what some people might say, well, maybe our guidelines need to be adjusted because but I don't believe that that's the case. As one of our administrators also shared with us today, when you get a classroom set of anything, it's usually in lots of 24. and that's usually what you purchase at the elementary level in particular. So we're below the 24 in all of our classes. We've had situations, and I know there are, again, other members in the room tonight where there has been a blip, and we've gone to the teachers and said, how do you want to handle this? They've either said, we want to add a section, we've added long-term subs, we've done a variety of things, but we've always consulted with the teachers at that particular grade level and informed the parents also. We've had this situation at a couple of schools, because over the summer, as you said,
It happens.
it's a challenge.
We-
So
We've had special meetings in order to hire teachers, just for that
Correct.
reason.
correct. Absolutely. We've added it to agendas and agenda items. So again, this was not anything more. I'm not trying to poke a bear. I'm not trying to do anything like that. All I'm trying to do is just contextualize the reality. If we truly want to have that opportunity for all students, this is where it lies in terms of the financial reality.
Yes, Mr. Reynolds.
So just to clarify, so in a school like Parker Farms, where you said it's below the, let's say, the average for the other.
This year.
This year. So what you're saying is, to make it, I guess, equitable, you have to raise the class sizes there, which would result in the elimination of teachers.
Correct. Correct. And there's a couple other schools too, Fritz, as well as Moses Y. Moses Y we're monitoring very closely because we're on the cusp. So, but we always
Well,
have
that's a transient,
Yep, and we have contingencies to cover that expense.
Yeah, the summer kills you.
So that's always being monitored. Okay. Family resource centers, again, this was another one I think that there were a few people, and I wanted to clarify. Again, when you look at our strategic plan budget, there's several years, there's 3 years. This is not in our budget for this year. We're doing it actually for free. That's what the program is called, free. Family resource engagement events. So it's totally free. We've gotten the resources through YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, Scout, Town Library, Youth and Social Services, and of course the Board of Education. So it's totally free twice a month in the evening for families. We did a survey. We found out the time of day they wanted, the locations. So this one, I just wanted to clarify because there were several comments on both surveys just wondering why we were pursuing this, but we're not. It's in the out years. But just for clarification, because this will be sent to all staff members tomorrow as well as all families like we did last year. We did it after every budget workshop just to keep everybody in the loop. Efficiencies, again, I would say that, again, we continue to look at inter-district special ed programming. As you know, we're starting the behavioral program. That was something that was brought up, and I'm proud our staff did recognize that, and that was very a nice comment on the part of staff. In-district transportation, we're always looking at that. You know that Marianne and Dominic are always looking at that. Do not replace staff when possible upon retirement. So through attrition, we're not replacing positions. As we mentioned, a clerical position is not being replaced. It's the school, college, the career and college specialist secretary is not being replaced because that person is retiring. So we're sunsetting that position, as well as we did with the greeter. And we reallocated staff. We eliminated the counseling coordinator position, which is an administrative position. So that was $120,000, over $120,000 reduction from our budget, as well as from the administrative services. And we also reduced one business office clerical position upon Dominic's arrival. Prior to his arrival, we did an analysis and we reduced one of our business office staff members. Hubcap. This is a $5,000 donation that the district makes. We receive unlimited use of the building. It does provide extended educational learning opportunities for students. The pop-up bakery, I don't think we could have had a better experience for our students, as well as all the connections. And this was brought to my attention when we were sharing this with the principals today. Somebody said, but all the connections that our students make through capstone projects, through art shows that are held there, the authentic environment. And I have to say, again, it's the $5,000 investment that certainly doesn't cover the cost of the space. The space is covered through other donations, grants that are written. So I just wanted to clarify that because that did come up, and I I didn't want people to think that this was a significant expenditure on the part of the district. Not that 5,000 isn't significant, but when in the grand scheme of things, I just wanted to clarify that for everyone. So we actually are not here. We are actually a little bit lower, and I want to pass this out to all of you. And then I'm going to leave this up here. Our budget number now, and I'll announce this, is a 1.97.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Hey, right?
We'll take anything we can get.
Yeah. So what is that?
So there was a minor reduction due to electric,
200,000, is that what it
and
equates to?
it was a, also, there was a gas adjustment, natural gas.
Thank you.
And I have some for those in the audience also. All right, so I'm done.
There were also handouts placed at each board member's seat for additional questions that were asked at the previous meeting. Any other questions before we move on about the sustained services that we had at our last meeting? Mrs. Corso?
Are we going back through those? Where's the color-coded sheet?
The color-coded sheet will come at the end of this.
We'll go back through those.
Right, right, because that's part of
That's our
strategic.
strategic plan. Thank you.
Right. So we'll go through the strategic, section 3. We'll do the same thing as we did at the last meeting. We'll go page by page. If there are questions, we can,
I'm not sure I'm asking a question, or rather making an observation, but based on our sustained services budget, I do think that there's a couple places where we can, where I think that we can decrease costs of sustained services. And one being the college and career counselors that were put up on the board not long ago. If you look at their job descriptions, there's quite a bit of overlap between their job descriptions and school counselors, school counseling positions. That's one place.
Hold on, so college, so,
There's 2 college and career counselors, full-time at both high
Right,
schools.
right,
And, you know, I think that some of the programs that they are offering our students, such as the Credit for Life piece, is very valuable. But I think that the cost of 2 full-time college and career, when you look at their job descriptions and compare those to a school counseling job description, there's quite a bit of overlap. So I thought that was worth a conversation. We're looking at 120,000 plus
For the two,
for 2 full-time,
not each.
for 2, including benefits? Do they get benefits?
Yes, they do. So that wouldn't be for new benefits.
so what was the,
So it's one, right now, they're budgeted for salary, and if Mr. Barone, I'll give him a moment to look for the benefit costs, but it's 120,754. That's for 2. So you're talking 6,000, just under 60,000, excuse me, 60,350, 360. If you were to reduce to 1,
Mrs. Raccio?
or eliminate both of them, if that's the druthers.
I'm going to go back in years now. This was at a meeting at Hall Avenue, so bear with me. I thought when we had filled both of those counseling positions, the guidance counseling stipends were supposed to go away. So we're now still paying guidance counselor stipends and having the college career positions.
Yes, that was a union matter that was not, how do I put this without violating any confidentiality? But the fact is, it was a union matter between the board and the union that we had to discuss.
So it's stay, the stipends stay.
Correct.
Other discussion on this particular item?
Aaron, how much of an overlap do you see?
Well, I think part of the role of a school counselor, and I'm speaking to personal experience as a school counselor, is being a college, first of all, college expert, because I'm the one that's guiding kids through the college application. And looking at the job description here, I have college and career counselors who are hosting college reps at each high school. Now, personally, I want to meet the college reps that come into my school, develop a relationship with them, see what they offer, what programs they offer, so that I can turn around to my personal caseload. I have a caseload of 200 plus students. I suspect our school counselors have the same. And I would imagine that, I would hope that they're doing the same thing. So that's one area where there's some overlap. They assist all students in researching their college and career plans. College is a big overlap I see. Now, also, I can see a need for, because the college process is much different than when, 20 years ago, when I did the college process. Much different. Everything's online, you know, and it's very competitive. So I think our school counselors need to be, you know, in the forefront of guiding our students. Our school counselors have caseloads, our college and career counselors don't. Our college and career specialists don't have specific caseloads, correct? Am I correct?
No, because they're not they're acting as a guidance counselor.
Right. So they're helping our kids. I'm not saying that the work that they're doing is not valuable, because I do think it's valuable, but I think that there's a ton of overlap. And for 120,000 plus benefits, I think it's worth a look at. I believe when they were first hired, they were grant funded. Is that correct?
No.
They were never grant funded?
No.
Okay, I apologize.
But you're also missing, I just want to clarify, you're missing about 35 to 40% of our population that doesn't go to college. They go into the world of work and look for career. And to be honest, that is a missing piece in counseling often. Maybe not in your particular situation, in your role in your district, but is often a missing piece. So when you look at the number of students who go to a four-year university from both high schools, actually Lyman Hall is lower, it's about 61%, and Sheen is higher, but this town average is about 71%. There's still, again, almost 30% of our students who are choosing other options. Now, I'm not saying that a counselor could not help them with those options, but again, developing and fostering the relationship with businesses for
Yep.
internships, you know, other collaborative opportunities, again, with a caseload of 200, which is well within the range, according to the National Counseling Standards, because we reviewed those many years ago, and we continue to stay within those. Those are some of the challenges. So I understand what you're saying about some of the redundancy, but I would be remiss if I didn't,
Yep.
you know, bring up
And
that
I
point.
agree with you with the career piece, because it's really hard for a high school counselor to get out into certain pathways. Like, we don't have a whole lot of release time to get out and do
Correct.
that. So if we're looking at the percentage of students going to college compared to the percentage of students that are going into work, and of course, there's overlap with career pieces also. There's definitely overlap with career pieces also. But I think if we're looking for, you know, I'm always looking for cost-saving measures. And if they're doing 35% college and 65% career, perhaps or the other way around, perhaps there's a way to, there's some significant cost savings in there to share a career specialist among schools or something.
Mrs. McKay?
If I'm not mistaken, I think the way this evolved, didn't we start with just one?
Correct.
And
Correct.
the person was housed at Sheehan and then would travel to Lyman Hall. And I think we actually grew the position because we saw such value that, just from a historical standpoint, that the person that was jockeying between the two schools. I mean, by virtue of being, you got to be housed at one school, that's just logistics. It was kind of an equity issue, but also the need was there that supported to grow the position so that each school had one. So just from a historical standpoint. So, I mean, so even if you recommended, I'm not sure you would reduce it by one person. We actually saw that the need was there to support the two positions, I thought, at least. That's just my historical background.
Further discussion on this particular point? Are there any other suggestions that need to be made before we move on to the strategic plan, or any other points of discussion from sustained budget?
Yep.
Okay, Mrs. Corso?
Sorry. Like I said, I'm always looking at cost-saving measures, and I looked at our curriculum and our graduation requirements. Our PE requirement, we are requiring 2 full years and two full credits of a PE requirement, when the state only recommends 1. So one of the questions that I had asked is, has there ever been a cost analysis done if we were to reduce the recommended PE requirement? When I think about PE, I loved my PE classes. I did. So I'm not saying that they wouldn't be available as, options, as electives, but in terms of requirements, I can think of being in a high school every day. I understand the value of PE. However, kids are not sweating. They're not working out during the school day, at least in my school. I could be wrong. And they're not showering during the school day, which is, the goal of working out. So I think it's, as a cost-saving measure, it's valuable looking into the fact that we are requiring 2 full credits of PE when the state is asking for 1 full credit of PE.
Mrs. Purcell?
Of course,
We're gonna
I have
agree
to
to disagree.
talk.
We're gonna agree to
I know, sorry about that. First off, I do, would have to disagree that students are not getting exercise and working out. I have to agree with that. Disagree with that. But what I do want to say is we do a survey to look at risky behaviors and all that type of stuff. And I know as a board, we've really looked at the drugs and the alcohol and stuff. But if you looked at the trends, the area that we're the weakest, above all, happens to do with weight management, nutrition, all the things that are covered in that particular area. And I would be, I can't even imagine taking something away that is so needed as far as physical education. What I'd love to do is possibly even look at maybe a whole wellness type situation. Right now, our students only get like a half a credit of health a year. In their 4 years. And maybe what you do is you look at something that combines the health and the PE. But definitely I can't see taking that down. If the other end, I'd want to push it up. And if you want, I know like Tony happens to be here, and I don't know if you can call someone here to come forward with some stats and things like that to kind of help support that position.
I just want to make another point to that. We do value wellness, and when you look at high school curriculum and we're requiring 2 credits of PE, we are not requiring any credits of world language, for example. World language, most colleges want to see 2, if not 3 full years of world language for admissions purposes. Colleges are not looking at, and I know I keep going back to college, but I think it's important, colleges are not looking at whether or not PE is taken in high school. So when we're looking at, overall cost of programming, and I just think it's an important piece to look at that requirement compared to other requirements in our, what's our science requirement, 2? We require 2 years of science to graduate?
I believe the science is 2. Just a point of reference, though, and this goes back to all of our conversations. You can't have it. We can't have it both ways. So we wouldn't be able to offer electives because then we would be holding on to staff unnecessarily. So you would cut as many staff members as we need to just teach the required courses. Because as soon as we open up electives, there's going to kids sign up to them. Your cost savings that you're looking for would not be actualized. So that's the challenge.
That's assuming every student signs up for PE.
But again, the challenge is that you have a part-time PE person. We could look at it more closely, but again, you would have to be very cautious in that regard, because again, if your goal, which I hear clearly, is to save money, if your goal is to save money, there's the unintended consequences. Students, scheduling causes a lot of opportunities for us in central office, and I use that in quotes, because you never know, there's pockets. And depending on who teaches the class, sometimes there's a really popular teacher, and so those different things. So I guess, you had asked, and we have looked at, the savings, and you would be, I'm just going to share because you asked the question, it'd be at least one staff member per school. So you're reducing 2 more teachers at the high school level.
That would be the savings.
And science is 3 credits, Ms. Latour just corrected me. So just wanted to make sure that got on there. But yes, I would, based on raw numbers, and again, it depends on how kids fall out between different years, but it would appear that we would be able to, it would be a reduction of most likely 1 FTE at each of the high schools in physical education.
Mrs. Purcell, did you have a?
No, I just want to respond. When you were talking about foreign language, we're talking about wellness, and talking the difference between a child's wellness and the ability to get in college. I understand the ability to get in college, but wellness, I think, is right up there. And I don't know, is it proper to ask him to come in and? Okay, thank you.
Pictures speak louder than words, and there's one that I'd like to speak to as I explain possible. While I'm explaining. So again, we're saying colleges aren't looking at what students are taking for physical education.
Correct.
And the board and the district and our teachers, we just don't want our students to get into college. We want them to be successful in college. And taking physical education every single year, as we have shifted our program and continue to improve our program, is going to, again, help these kids be successful. Thank you. Be successful in college. As the most recent school health survey highlighted, mental health is a major issue with our students. And again, how we are shifting, and I'll explain our new vision for health and physical education, how we are shifting the physical education curriculum is going to help that. But I also have to highlight the importance of kids moving every single day. And hopefully I can convince you that not only is it important, but let's find more avenues for kids to move throughout the school day, which we've already started to do at the elementary levels, but we want to find more opportunities at the secondary levels. So up here, we have a brain scan of a composite of 20 different students' brains on the left, 20 different students' brains on the right. And you can see they're taking the same test, and on the left, these students sat quietly, then they took the test. On the right, those students just walked for 20 minutes, and then they took that same test. So it was exercise alone that fired up their brains and got them prepared to learn. And the newest research coming out makes it clear that the best way to work on any difficult project, the best way to take a test is immediately after cardiovascular exercise. We can't even talk about sports because this needs to happen during the school day while kids are in class. There's a few schools that have really embraced physical education, and they have every kid every day taking phys ed. And the teachers, the classroom teachers, they see this, they know this, and they fight to get their classes immediately after the quality PE class because the kids are moving and their scores academically are through the roof. The TIMS, the Trends, Trends in International Math and Science, these districts that have taken this big worldwide assessment, they scored 1 in science and 6 in math in the world. And they attribute it specifically to having quality physical education program where kids are moving on a regular basis. When kids are moving during the school day, these different neurochemicals or these different chemicals, neurotransmitters, get released. 3 major ones get released when kids exercise, when we exercise, when anybody exercises. Sometimes they get released by themselves. Sometimes they latch on to one another when they get released. So when dopamine and norepinephrine get released, it helps kids with attention. There are doctors that are now prescribing exercise instead of Adderall because it's so powerful and it's so effective. Again, we're talking about the quality of educational experience that we want for our kids here in Wallingford. And going backwards from 2 credits, I think would do our kids a disservice and it would really hurt them. It's very clear that kids that are more fit do better academically. So this is a study with a sample size of 2 million kids. This was done out in California. SAT stands for the Stanford Academic Test. It's not the SAT that we think of here on the East Coast. But California requires 6 fitness tests. Connecticut requires 4 fitness tests. Kids that didn't pass any of the fitness tests, here are their scores for math and for reading on this particular standardized test. Kids that passed 1 of the fitness tests, here are their scores. So you can see there's a direct correlation, and this is a well-sourced study, well-cited study. So the more fit kids are, the better they do academically. Another study recently came out, this was in NPR, kids gain most weight during the summer. They need that exercise during school. They need us to provide that with them because they aren't getting it on their own, unfortunately. We have a new vision for the health and PE program. One of the first things I did last year was to sit down with all of the physical education teachers and health teachers, K through 12, because we're invested in this together. And they came up with this. This doesn't come from me, this came from our teachers. Wallingford graduates will be motivated and prepared with the skills and knowledge to develop and maintain overall wellness through lifelong activities and healthy practices. This is the direction that we are changing, that we are shifting to. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's vital that we get kids to see that lifelong activity and exercise, this is a habit that has to be developed now. And so telling kids, okay, you can take PE freshman, sophomore year, and then if you don't want to take it junior, senior, you don't have to, sends the wrong message for us. And sends the wrong message of what our vision is, how we're moving forward. So really we have 2 main goals. Every PE teacher and health teacher has 2 main goals. Well, I should say PE teacher has 2 main goals. Every single day, 1, they're trying to get their kids to move as much as possible so they can get those benefits academically. But they're also trying to give them the skills and teach them the skills while they are moving in order to take care of their bodies for the rest of their life. It's a juggle, it's a challenge, it's a struggle at times, but it's for the kids' best interest, and what parent wouldn't want their kids to learn these skills and be healthier throughout life. So hopefully that explains our vision and where we're heading and why we feel it's really important to continue with the 2 credits at the high school level.
Thank you. Mr. Ross?
Hi, my apologies. Thank you for it's very informative, but who are you and what is your job? I'm sorry, I'm new.
Hey, Mr. Ross, I'm new too, and so my name is Tony Loomis. Last year I was the health and wellness curriculum resource teacher, and I'm still in that role this year. I'm also the interim school counseling coordinator until the end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Corso?
I'm not arguing the benefits of moving. I agree with you. I 100% agree with you that kids need to move and we all need to be active. Some of us, we need to be more active than we are now, but in any case, I think it's remiss to not bring it up when I know what the state is requiring compared to what we're requiring, when I know that the cost of our budget, when I'm looking at our budget, when I'm looking at our sustained services, how can we reduce the cost of sustained services if at all possible? and still prepare our students to be college and career ready. And that's one place that I saw that it could happen. I don't, like I said, I see the benefits of moving, but I think movement and moving can be done outside of the school day as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be done during the school day, and it doesn't necessarily need to be done on the backs of taxpayers when the state is saying 1 credit of PE and 0.5 credits of health. So, yeah. I wanted to make that point. Especially, one more thing. If we are looking to hire a world language coordinator in the curriculum office that's going to oversee our entire world language program, yet we don't have a requirement for world language for graduation. We have a 0 requirement for world language. We have 2 credits for PE. And if we want to talk equity and cost analysis, I think that's a great place to start.
Just 2 clarifications. First of all, because you asked this question, it was already in the board packet. You might not have read the response to it, but that person would also be responsible for EL and bilingual, which we presently don't have anybody. Number 2, I want to make sure and caution you when you say sustained services, because that would not be a sustained services budget. So we need to make sure that we use the correct terms with that, because we would be reducing services to our students in both your recommendations. Number 1, the college and career specialist, and number 2, the PE. I'm not saying it because there's just a lot of terms that go out, and then I, unfortunately, am the one who's the recipient of all the emails. What did you mean by this? I just want to clarify that because it is a reduction in services, which is fine if that's what the board, we've done that before, but I just want to make sure because we have to be cautious with that. But I do understand your world language comment, but again, additionally, as you saw, there's an increased EL population. We've been trying to acquire services in that area for several years. I know that we also would like to consider, and I'm not trying to jump to the strategic plan, but I know that there's the World Language Coordinator or Global Studies Coordinator, whatever, I forgot what term we settled on, and then also the Science Coordinator. We're making a recommendation to consider using grant funds to offset the additional expenditure. So Ms. Latour, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but has done sliced and diced and triple cut in different ways. There are grants that we can definitely utilize to offset the expenditure without adding costs to our budget, which we all agree is a good thing, but getting the benefit of the resources. So we wanted to share that with you, and I don't mean to preempt the conversation, but I just wanted to share that was good news. And I have to say, Ms. Latour has done a phenomenal job in many areas, but especially with the grants. The grants have been an area where she's really wrapped her arms around it with also a staff member, Lorinda Weaver, who is here to really make certain that we're using them and maximizing the potential. A lot of people don't know, but grants, oftentimes you have carryover money, and I know you're familiar with this in your role. There's carryover money, and there's good use of carryover money, and there's sometimes better use of carryover money. And so that's what we're looking at, is to recommend that with the board's approval, and that was up for discussion, of course, to utilize those resources to fund those, the differential in those positions. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Mrs. Castelli?
So correct me if I'm wrong, Sal, but I do believe that we also exceed the state's requirements or state standards with respect to credits in general. Don't we have 25 credits to
We have
graduate
25,
from?
and right now the state average is
21,
Well,
right?
the state mandate is 21. It's
Yeah.
supposed to increase. Hasn't gotten there yet. And there's a lot of things that haven't gotten there yet, as you would know in your role, with a variety of graduation requirements. Some districts have reduced down to 21. Again, I think Wallingford was one of the first districts to actually take the jump to 25. That predates my arrival. So that has to be at least 10, 12 years ago. You're right, Ms. Caselli.
And to be honest with you, I think that's one of the things I personally take pride in, that the Wallingford district has chosen to even exceed what the state requires.
Further discussion on these topics? All right, let's move on to the strategic plan. That's in section 3 of your binder. And we're starting with community outreach and communication. Dr. Menzel?
Yes, this particular area, you'll note there are limited requests for this year. Actually, I don't believe there are any requests for this year. So again, I think we can move right past that one. And now we go to Ms. Latour.
So curriculum and instruction. Ms. Latour.
Before we get started, just so you know, we did invite all the curriculum staff because we knew that curriculum was going to be discussed at length this evening. So if you do have questions, we could pause and have one of our curriculum staff members come up to address a specific question if you have one. And they'll introduce themselves by name and area.
You know, Tony was put on the spot. Yeah, that wasn't fair. Tony was like, jumped right in there. I'm got Tony's back on that. You jumped right in there.
So perhaps if there are questions that come up that require answering from our professionals in the audience, perhaps they can come to the microphone and state their title and name. That might be helpful.
Thank you.
Oh, that's hysterical.
All right, so we're now on page 6.
Yep.
In section 3.
Okay, so for the first goal in curriculum and instruction, this is about foundational skills in the different subject areas. And if you'll notice for 2018-19, there are 3 areas that were funded. One is to increase instructional coaches, and they're in varying orders on the priority list, which is a part of your budget binder. But to just give you a general overview of this particular goal area, instructional coaches have found to be very, very useful in our elementary schools. And they're, having 4 schools each, it's tough to get to every place that they need to get to. In this particular goal area, we recognize also that the 6-12 grades would benefit from this type of coaching experience. So there are 2 coaches which we wish to fund in the 18-19 plan for ELA and math at the 6-12 level, and then followed in subsequent years additional schools, coaches for the elementary schools because they are stretched so thin. Another area for funding for the 18-19 that's being proposed would be that additional funding to bring our curriculum resource teacher in the area of science and world language to an administrative position. This would also broaden their role and expand it. So for example, science curriculum coordinator, we're looking to expand to more science and technology. So Kate O'Donnell, who's done an amazing job working with our science teachers, updating all the science curriculum to the new NGSS standards, would also take on the area of technology in K-8. So we have our infotech teachers, we have our middle school capstone teachers who are doing the curriculum, the Dream, Design, Do curriculum, which Kate is very familiar with. And she would be able to work closely to align the standards within those curriculums so that there's a good progression from year to year. In addition, she would be expanding her role to evaluate staff as well. For world language, you'll notice in, I think, a different goal area, we changed the name, similar to the science and technology. So going from just a curriculum resource teacher to a curriculum coordinator, we would broaden world language to more of global, I think communications is what we settled on. And we would expand that position to not only encompass the 312 world language, we are still working on, and you'll see it in a few pages, bringing world language down to the K2 level. In addition, Ms. Moore would take on EL and bilingual department. Right now, that falls under the curriculum department. I've been working with the EL bilingual teachers to bring the group together to discuss guidelines and progressions, and our EL population has grown quite significantly over the last few years. So this allows for a dedicated person to work with curriculum and assessment, and again, add on evaluations to that. And a lot comes with, especially the EL bilingual department, in terms of state testing in making certain that our students are making the type of progress that they need.
Mr. Votto?
Are you saying that the the cost would be an addition to their present salary would be, for instance, $22,273.
Correct. So the cost that you see in the 18-19 section of this goal area is the differential between where their salary is on the teacher's contract and where it would be as a curriculum coordinator in step 1 of the administrator's contract.
And what would be the big difference, other than the fact they could evaluate, evaluate people, but you're giving them, like, for instance, the science person would become a tech person, K-8, is that what you said?
Correct. So in addition to their roles and responsibilities now, which are extensive, they would be adding other things to their role. So science would add in the K-8 technology in addition to all the evaluations in their department area. And for world language, it would be adding in the EL bilingual department, which has grown quite significantly, in addition to all the evaluations, and continuing to plan for hopefully the the putting Spanish down in the K2 level.
Okay.
Mrs. McKay?
Okay, so I need some help in my budget book.
Sure.
Where is it in my budget book that you guys, because I'm trying to figure out where you guys ranked these
Here.
items.
Yep.
You know what page?
It was an addition,
It was an
Roxanne.
addition.
I'm sorry?
It was an additional thing, it wasn't in the book originally.
So it's page 30, I'll give you mine.
No, I don't.
Page 33.
I got it right here.
It's the end of the section.
Page 33 in this section?
Yes, it
Yeah.
should
Hold
be
on,
in that
hold on.
section.
They were replaced with new ones, Mary.
Okay, wait,
Right.
I've got
But
it.
it'll give her
This is
the
what
priority.
the document looks
Okay, but
like
this
that
is
you're
what I'm-
looking for.
Correct.
Very colorful.
So it starts with page 33.
It's only 2 pages.
Strategic
That's what
plan
I'm- just so I can-
prioritization.
Trace it back, if
Sure.
that makes sense. Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, the 2 positions that are on this page that Ms. Latour just spoke to, we are comfortable recommending to the board that they be funded through grants, so they would be taken off the strategic plan, they would be taken off the prioritization list, but the board would, of course, have to approve the fact that you want to move forward in that direction.
So,
The
okay.
2 positions we just
Wait,
spoke,
Can I just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to answer the question from Mr. Votto. The 2 positions that Ms. Latour just spoke about,
Yeah.
the science and the global communications, those additional costs that are allocated here or that are articulated here could be covered by grants rather than having to be in our local Board of Education budget. And that was something that we wanted to verify before we brought to you, but that can happen. So you could approve those without additional expenditures from local Board of Ed, but we would look for your approval to do that because, obviously, we don't make those decisions without consulting you as a board.
Roxanne?
Okay, so I'm still having a hard time following along, but thank you. I think we need to talk about that, obviously. So I'm not getting out, is the Global Communication Curriculum Coordinator the same as the World Language?
Correct.
Okay, so because they're named 2 different, or
Yeah,
did
right.
I,
Right.
do I not have the right?
No,
you
you're
do.
good.
No, you're right, I guess.
Okay, but also my math doesn't add up. So the Science and Technology Curriculum Coordinator and the Global Communication Curriculum Coordinator is $58,510, is what I'm reading there.
Doesn't.
But if I do my
No, it
math
doesn't
at
add up.
22,273 and 28,909, that's not going to equal 58,510. So what am I missing?
Well, probably faulty math.
Okay.
Sorry, Christy. And the fact
Coaches.
is, as we're looking at the different, it could just be a calculation of where they are currently on the salary schedule and just a misalignment. So bottom line,
Which
though,
one should
it
I
is
follow?
I would go with the higher amount, the 58. When you look at things like, the differences between annuities and the teacher's contract versus admin, I'll
fine.
confirm the numbers,
That's fine.
but get back to you.
I mean, I'm off by like
Yeah.
about
Yep.
less than $8,000. I mean, it's not huge numbers, but it is
Okay.
off. So follow this listing for dollars.
Correct.
right?
And that's
Okay.
to give you a general awareness of what the
fine.
differential is. As Dr. Menzo stated, this can be accomplished through the grant funds so that there's no additional cost that you experience in the strategic plan budget or in the budget
And
that you're approving.
What's the life expectancy of that grant?
Well, the grants that we receive are annual, based on They're federal grants. And so it's not a grant like Smart Start where in, 10 years,
Right.
that money is no longer. So these are grants that we will experience each year.
Which
It
title?
changes.
Which title grant is it?
We're looking at a portion of Title I and Title III.
So you think once you apply and you reapply, you're pretty,
We do
I'm
reapply
concerned about it
annually.
being
Yep.
recurring expense,
There- I
obviously.
understand.
They're known as federal entitlement grants. So
Okay.
it's based on population and needs of the population, which ARCS continues to grow.
So in an essence, we could support this, which is your number 2. That's why I wanted to follow along to
Gotcha.
see
Right.
where you guys are. It helps me to organize myself.
It is number 2 on the priority list, and just, it is listed with 2 different names, and partly
That's fine.
because I do want to explain that, though. I tried to preserve the integrity of the strategic plan as it was written, but understanding the fact that that particular position does need to broaden in scope, which is why, as we've worked in the last year as a curriculum office and looking at how we can be most efficient, how we can cover all of our content areas in the manner in which we want to, in terms of curriculum writing and instruction and working with our teachers, I just felt the need to explain why I left it in one way at one goal and called it something different in another one.
So our goal is to use the global, move towards the global communication, and that speaks to including that ELL population.
Right, and that's a very big population that we need to really pay close attention to. As I've said, the population itself has increased dramatically over the last 5 years, and we do need to make certain there's a consistent program in each of our schools that we're addressing our level 1 students in the same manner in terms of how often we're seeing our level 2, 3, and 4 to make sure that they're progressing in the manner that we want them to. There isn't, every student is so unique and individual as they come in, which is not surprising. So we need to make sure that we have all of the resources that we get together as a department and as a group to discuss problems of practice, et cetera. And it's important to have that group meet regularly and have guidance.
So that's a real concern to me. I applaud that initiative and that focus. I literally had the experience this fall where I was in a first grade classroom, and literally there was a student there that 2 weeks earlier, it was like the end of September, a week earlier, this person was, this little girl was in another country.
Yep.
Living, and was plunked out of her country for whatever, her family moved, and now, but she literally does not speak a word of English. And she is in our schools.
Just 2 weeks ago, we had 2 students enter that from a different country who do not speak, and it happens all of the time.
And I watched this little girl navigate through the classroom, and she missed so much, but everybody was so attentive and so concerned about making sure she felt a part, and fortunately there were other students that spoke her language, so helped her along, and but I think that it's really important to, I was shocked to think about that. I mean, I knew that exists, but to actually witness it and to see a student who was plucked into and placed in our school system a week earlier was in a completely different world, literally, is mind-boggling to me. So I thank you for that. So is this an opportunity for us to take this off and just
Yes,
Yes.
great,
What?
we can, if
eliminate it?
we can eliminate it because it will be grant funded,
Yeah,
so
it'll
we
be all
can
grant
eliminate
funded.
it
So
off
we
the
don't need to even
strategic
discuss
plan
this.
prioritization.
I have a question first about that.
Oh, okay, first, before, she's just asking that, we're not doing anything yet. Mrs. Purcell, followed by Mrs. Castelli, followed by Mrs. Okay,
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So I have three general questions regarding this federal entitlement grant. Do we have to apply for it specifically for these purposes? Or is it a federal entitlement grant that's like, just here's some money and you disperse it as you want?
No,
Or, you know,
unfortunately.
within certain, within certain.
With certain guidelines, yes. We get our allocation from these grants, and then Mrs. Weaver and I will sit down and talk about where it best needs to be allocated, and there's certain buckets you have to allocate money into, and you apply for the grant. I mean, it's,
Okay, so
the
we
money
wouldn't
is
be-
there,
so
but
is
then you
this-
have to apply, and it gets approved by the state, and then you get your money.
All right, but then is this robbing Paul to pay Peter, whatever that expression is? Or, you know, in other words, we have to make decisions, this is where we're going to use the
Yep.
money, as opposed to using it somewhere else. It's not specific for these particular roles, right?
Well,
You're taking it from somewhere else.
It is and it isn't. You know, you have these line items, these broad buckets are within the grant. So it's how you're allocating that money in order to best move your school and your students forward. So, you know, from that lens, it is still, you know, the money is allocated in many different ways, whether it's through supplies, it's through professional development, it's through salaries or otherwise. So it is a part of that grant.
But I just want to clarify, I don't believe with this reallocation that we're reducing any present items
Correct.
that we're requesting.
Right.
There's carryover money that continues to carry over, and what we're looking to do
Carryover
is...
grant money, you mean?
Carryover
Okay.
grant money. So we're looking to stop there still will be carryover, but it won't be as significant, because at some point it expires.
Right.
And you don't want that to expire, because then you're giving money back to the federal government.
Right.
So I just want to make it clear that this grant money is not going to now take away from present
what I wanted to make sure.
services.
Thank you.
Or take away resources, or take away textbooks, or professional development, or anything like that. So this is not going to supplant, to supplant or take away any of those services. So that's why, if this were to take place, we'd still have a sustained services budget, because the services that were previously provided by this grant will continue to be provided by this grant, in addition to these services.
Okay, Kelly? Okay, Mr. Reynolds.
Oh, boy, that was quick. For these two new positions, you had mentioned that part of their, I guess, increased role or whatever, they'll be evaluating teachers.
Correct.
Do you have any idea, and I'm not gonna hold you till I can, just a ballpark figure, what percentage of their workload will be used to evaluate teachers?
What?
5%, 10%?
Oh, I'm not really sure, to be
Oh.
honest. However, I do know that the evaluation plan that we have requires, for our certified staff, for example, a formal eval, a review of practice, and an informal evaluation for all tenured teachers. So having the content expert in science or world language to be able to observe those areas and provide critical feedback in terms of instructional strategies, and to know the content that deeply is a huge benefit.
One last quick, again, our tenured teachers we used to refer, when I was a teacher, as a formal evaluation that's done once a year.
No, for us, in Wallingford's teacher evaluation plan, our tenured teachers are observed at least 3 times. One is an informal
Well, I'm
observation.
talking about the formal though, where you,
One is a formal observation, and one is called a review of practice. That could be a variety of different things. It could be a presentation, it could be in a meeting, it could be a review of a curricular unit and lesson plans and how you adjust and modify your instruction. The district's teacher evaluation committee has put together a list of suggested examples for what a review of practice would look like. For our non-tenured teacher, it's 3 formal observations a year at a minimum. So that's pre-conference, lesson plan, observation, post-conference, soup to nuts, so.
But I don't want to, for the teachers' sake, and also for administrators' sake, underestimate the work that goes into follow-up for an informal as well as review of practice.
Yeah. Correct.
Teachers are still completing documents, reflections, administrators are still doing that. So just the traditional formal observation, I know, because I go back to that one too, informal doesn't and I know you know this because you were just recently in the classroom, doesn't mean just that the administrator goes in, watches something, and then there's no follow-up. The teacher has follow-up, the administrator has follow-up. It's a tremendous amount of work on both sides of the equation.
Which we can, I'll just briefly mention, we can probably save it for another discussion, because I know there is.
Please use the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
There's obviously increased, over the last couple of years.
Yep.
On administrators.
And on teachers.
Is it necessary, well, yeah, exactly.
And on teachers, don't forget.
Is it necessary, again, to do what I consider the formal, once a year?
Well, actually, our professional development evaluation committee meets regularly, and we're having those discussions now. When we first changed our evaluation plan, it was aligned with the Connecticut Seed document.
Yeah.
And so now, after having several years of Wallingford's version of that, we continue to review and revise to make certain that it's not burdensome on the teacher or the administrator. We've gotten really nice, valuable feedback from all stakeholders to start making some changes, but then ultimately it does need to be approved by the state.
Okay.
And the board.
I don't want to.
First the board, and then.
Correct.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to, because I've seen it from the teacher's end, and it's tremendous amount of work.
Yes, it is.
It is a lot of work.
And that's why I was wondering
Yep.
about going through this every year.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Votto.
Okay. I'd like to address that at a later date, teacher evaluation.
I know you won't.
Okay, so save that up here. My question is, you mentioned, is it Title I funds?
Those are some of our grants, Title I, Title II, Title III, bilingual, and we have a new Title IV grant, but in particular, Title I and Title III would be an area that I would look at
All right, but Title I.
for salaries.
Okay. But every year we get those title monies, but they've gone down. I think they went down from last year to this year.
No.
Are you got the same amount or better than last year?
This year, in Title I and Title II, we went up. Title III, we went down slightly. Bilingual, we went down slightly. And Title IV is a brand-new grant, which we got what was allocated to us by the state. So it's brand new.
I just get concerned about that because we don't know where these funds are going to go
I
from year to
understand.
year. We're always talking about state and federal issues with money and whatnot, and I think that's something to think about.
Just to interject, if you want to see what some of the funding that we're getting with regard to some of those titles and other, that's found in Section 6 of your book.
My other concern is that even though there's not going to be a cost to us with these additional monies to make these people an administrator, we are making 2 new administrators, and that has to have some impact on negotiations. When we get into negotiating contracts and whatnot, that's 2 more administrators you have to think about. So there could be more costs associated with that. And I, with all due respect to the people involved, I don't know why some of these jobs cannot be shared. This might, I don't know. You have your department chairs, and granted they are teaching an extra class next year, but they do, I'm sure, can also coordinate a little bit with some of these people and some of these things that they are going to be expected to do. I just get concerned making 2 more administrators, that's all. That's just my comments. And it was going to follow up with, I'm going to say it now, the next line with even though it's next year and the year after, I like to see those 2 numbers moved over to this year, to 18-19, the social studies text or whatever for grade 5.
I don't think they're quite ready to do that yet, though, which is why, after speaking with Mr. Francese, they're in the middle of rewriting social studies to align with the framework. So they're just not quite ready. They know that there's going to be a need for that, which is why the placeholder is there. But they're currently in the process of writing. So you'll notice on your textbook sheet, there is some money in there for next year for textbooks in the areas that we know we're set, we know we need it. This is because we know it's coming down the pike, it's coming down quickly. We want to have that there just to kind of put it out there, but they're just not quite ready to pinpoint an exact amount.
Because I really believe we need a boost in our social studies program.
Correct. The writers that are working with Mr. Francesi are doing an amazing job. And so we anticipate having more information for you in terms of social studies curriculum by the spring.
Thank you.
Mrs. Purcell?
Hi, a couple things. First off, being a teacher who was never evaluated by somebody in my discipline, and my evaluators are great and my evaluations were good, but it was difficult. They didn't always know what to look for in my class, and I think it's a real plus for the teacher and to grow the discipline to have an evaluator that is in your discipline. The other thing I think is really important is that we earlier looked at how many evaluations the administrators had to do, and the numbers were really high. And I think if we can get a few more people to do some of those evaluations, it's going to help overall. And I just wanted to say thank you to Carrie to be able to come up with a way to get something that's number 2 on the list of strategic planning without affecting our budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other remarks on this page, which is page 6, on those 3 items.
Okay, so goal 2 doesn't have anything for next year. Goal 3, we don't have anything that needs funding. Goal 4, same thing. Goal 5 is putting an allocation in for makerspaces. We would start with the 2 high schools. So currently, our 3-5 schools have makerspaces in each of their buildings, as do the middle schools. So this carries on that work into the high schools. They would be most likely housed out of the media center, available to all students. So that is funding for the equipment and materials necessary to establish those spaces. They would not be reoccurring costs. So that is two schools, funding for 2 schools. And then goal 6, the only thing that is in goal 6 in next year's proposed strategic plan is the facility survey. We spoke about this last week, or it wasn't last, yeah, it was last week. Sorry, it's only Monday. That, you know, the facility service in general kind of touches upon many different areas, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that it's about our students, which is why it's residing in the curricular strategic plan. That's it for me.
Any questions or remarks about that? Moving on to district climate.
Okay, district climate, starting on page 13, there is no request for this year. 14, there is no request for goal number 4. Goal number 5, if you go to page 15, we mentioned the school resource officers. I explained earlier that it doesn't seem that those are going to be come to fruition through the police officers or the police department's budget this year, because in speaking with him on Friday, again, he needs to add staff, but just to maintain the level of call volume that he receives. So again, it's on our priority list. However, it probably will come off our priority list because of that conversation. So just to make you aware. The other item, and this goes back to a decision that we made with our building administrators at the elementary level in particular, was to push out the concept of the dean of students a year, because they put this forward in a very meaningful and purposeful manner of adding more social workers, most likely social workers, not necessarily psychologists, but could be, but we're looking at more social workers, 3 for our elementary schools because of the significant emotional needs of our students coming into our district. That was echoed in our staff survey, so I just want to state that. This is a growing need, and we see that, yes, 3 is an odd number. We'd love to have the 4th, but we're trying to be somewhat conservative, but we would use those staff in the schools that had the highest need. Presently, just for your information, each elementary school has 1 full-time social worker or psychologist, and then a part-time psychologist in addition. So they share a psychologist between 2 schools, but they have 1 full-time mental health professional in their building. So this would help us get closer to having each of those schools have 2 full-time mental health professionals, but not fully get there.
Mrs. McKay?
So I'm wondering, depending on the board's decisions, looking at your priority list, this is more of a philosophical question.
Sure.
If, in fact, things, well, for example, your item 2, let's say that got eliminated, just say, that, would you want to move, or are you comfortable with it being 3 and then 1? Or would you reposition that depending on what falls off or moves in your strategic plan?
We would definitely reposition that and add the 4th.
Okay, that's what
I think I could speak for, yes, okay. Definitely, Ms. Klimaszewski, yes.
So depending on the board's pleasure, that's something to consider one way or the other. I'm just putting it out there, yeah.
Where would you put them? Like 4 of them with the 1, 2, 3? There's-
We would sit down, obviously, as a team. I don't know if you could jump in. I don't know to answer your question.
So I think what we would want to do first is we would want to have a full-time social worker in each of the elementaries. There definitely is a different skill set between a psychologist and a social worker.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you could speak to that. And so I think that with the difficulties that we've seen, with the increase with the behaviors, the difficulty with children to be able to regulate their emotions, to deal with trauma, we really feel like having that full-time social worker is an important thing. That's why I keep pushing for social worker. But I think that if it ends up being a psychologist, it's important that we really get that mental health piece there. So that would be the push, to try to balance it out, I think, between the elementaries.
And we would look at need, because it might not be equal, but it would be equitable based on the needs of the students in that building. So some of our schools have seen an influx in higher need, and the principals work very collaboratively. They're always sharing and saying, you could take this person this extra time, that time. This would give us more flexibility to meet those needs of our youngest and most vulnerable.
So do we make like Roxanne's word, a placeholder, or do we say
I'll make
how
note.
we want to do it?
I'm gonna.
What
Well,
do you
I'll
mean
make.
for 4 versus 3, Mike? Is that what you're asking?
I'll make a note. I'll make a note, and then because when
We'll go back.
it's well noted. Don't worry. Thank you. Very well noted.
Other remarks on this page? Okay, moving on to facilities.
Good evening.
Good
Make
evening.
sure you have it on. There
It's
you
on.
go.
Yep.
All right.
All right. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the different sections. If anyone sees something they want to stop me or question me on, feel free. Our first section is the Bondable Section. Thanks to Roxanne McKay and Dr. Menzo and the mayor and the town council for their support. We've shifted many of these bondable or bigger job costs onto the town. And they, in turn, have bonded quite a few projects for us and continue to bond projects, the latest of which are the stage lighting projects at the 2 middle schools and 2 high schools, and the window replacement project at 4 schools. Both are very much needed and will provide, savings in the form of energy. Both projects have an energy factor, and comfort with the windows, major deal. You'll see a few items in yellow. We had an item at DAG that was basically parking lot drainage, so we're going to try to combine that with a future paving project, so as to not excavate that parking lot multiple times. The next yellow item down has been completed. I just signed off on that invoice today.
Okay, so wait, I'm
Wait a minute, I'm
confused.
confused.
Where are we,
Oh.
Mark?
This
You
is-
lost me at,
He's on
Page
page
17,
17.
capital
yeah, I'm in
projects.
17, but,
But
okay, you're going
complete
through
or
like.
not complete, the last
Column.
the last column.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And what'd you say is now completed?
It is, as of today.
Which one?
It's
one halfway down.
code compliance hand sinks,
Okay.
Stevens, DAG, Lyman Hall. That's for the kitchen, health code requirement. And moving on to page 18.
Well, wait. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
why aren't we looking at that column that says 1819 on page 17, where you have the portable classrooms, first thing, 599,000?
Those are requested to the mayor, so those have not
These are
been
bondable.
allocated.
I didn't think that was the portable classrooms, that's why I,
Well, the portable classrooms, we had brief conversation when I presented the budget a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago, is that the mayor asked us to go back and look at that more closely, because this amount in here is to renovate the classrooms.
that's what I needed to know. All right.
And so what we're looking at, and Mark and I have been working on this, is to look at what are some other options. The first option we tried to investigate was disseminating the classrooms out to the other elementary schools. There wasn't enough space. It was going to cost us more in staffing because of the occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy that would need to happen. Now we're looking at other more permanent options. We did get some pricing last year that we shared with the mayor, but we want to fine tune those numbers on a different type of environment. So rather than a portable classroom, they're the prefabbed, but they're meant for longevity. They're meant to be put on a slab, but
Permanent.
Mark can explain better on
Permanent
that.
structures.
They're permanent structures. So we're getting more information on that, but that's a large, I mean, again, it's not gonna be 300,000, it's gotta be 400,000.
It's gonna be about what?
I don't wanna throw out a number, because I could be totally off base.
And are you thinking, if that were to go that way, to put it in the same place where the program is now, or maybe not?
Potentially, we see the space still, the place being advantageous, because of the land that is there, and also because of the recently renovated playscape. And so that's something that we would want to consider. But again, we're looking at all options. I know in our meeting with the mayor, he discussed a building that they just put up prefab for garages for the police department. That is not the same type of structure, so the cost of that is much more significant. So we were trying to explain. So we want to make sure we fine-tune the numbers. We'll share those with the board before we share them with the mayor, and at the same time give him that information. Because there's a lot that goes into these structures, because we have to have appropriate bathrooms, we have to have the electrical, the heating, all those pieces.
Two more questions.
Sure.
Basically, what's wrong with those classrooms?
Well, first of all, how old are they?
Is it the,
29 years old.
I know the insides weren't too bad the last time I was in them, which was a while ago, I'll admit. But isn't it the bottom, the outside, or?
The exterior structure of those buildings they were designed to last 10 years. There's no overlapping construction methods. Typical wood frame construction does not, it relies on flashings and overlapping layers. None of that exists in those buildings. That's allowed water to seep in windows, window frames, sheathing seams, and that's in turn gone down inside the walls, and in some cases actually seeped out onto the plywood and rotted the plywood. So we keep making minor repairs, but the structure was not meant to do what we're asking it to do. You don't rely on a bead of caulk on a wood structure. That's something that's typically found in commercial construction of masonry, steel, concrete, that type of thing.
How many rooms do you need, approximately, excluding bathrooms?
Yeah, there was at least, we were looking at between classrooms and alternative spaces, I believe 8 to 10 spaces. Because you have to have a space for resource, you have to have a space for OT, PT. That has to have a special structure to hang swings and other equipment. You also need an office space for meeting, for PPTs, consultation. So it was about 8 to 10 spaces that we were initially looking at.
All right, thank you.
And that was not looking for expansion or bringing anybody in, that was just keeping us at our level.
Mrs. McKay, did you have
No, that's fine.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah, the Lyman Hall new gymnasium, what's going to happen to the old gymnasium?
We haven't even thought of hiring a design team yet, so some of that's still up in the air, but the intent, at least Joe Corso's intent and my intent, would be to leave the existing structure intact. This would be a complete new structure, leaving the existing there, and we would probably use that for gym classes and that type of thing. But the footprint of the existing gym will not give us the desired effect. So we can't knock that down and build a gymnasium in that footprint. We'd be looking at probably locating it to the north or northeast in that student parking area. The site does have some limitations, but there's a lot of land there.
Again, just note on the columns, and this, I know it could get, I just want to clarify, that hasn't been requested of the mayor at this point. I think that it would be premature to do so with the facility study that we're recommending as a school district, and hopefully you will see fit to recommend that as part of our budget, because that study will determine on a variety of layers what is necessary for our community. But that would be, if we chose to do that, that would be something to recommend in a later date. That's not being recommended
By a
right
later
now.
date, another year or so.
Correct.
Well, that's.
Correct. It's in 18, 19. It actually, most likely, depending on if we do a facility study, we couldn't get one activated probably till the summer, after July 1st, just because we want to make sure the budget passes. We'd have to go to RFP, which, again, if the board chose to move that forward in this process, believe me, starting, we'll get the RFP reviewed, we'll share it with you if that's something that the board wants to do. But yeah, we probably would be pushing that back at least a year or two for consideration.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that that would be true of any major, the board might think about that in the back of our minds, that if we decide to commit to doing some type of a facility survey, any large, really large projects like that, would probably would get delayed, just because, well, maybe not, but depending, the survey would usurp it, let me put it that way.
The other point that Mark made a couple of times, and I appreciate you bringing this up because it's really important to state, is that there are several projects at, for example, like Sheehan High School, that if you do one,
Right.
it leads to another, which
Right.
leads to another, which leads to another. Now you have a building project. You don't
Right.
have a renovation. You don't have a capital project. You have a building project. So we were very clear in our conversations. Mark was extremely clear with the mayor that we love to do, for example, the bathrooms at Sheehan. They believe me, they need to be done.
Yeah.
But there are so many things that once you open up a bathroom,
Right.
now you open up another space, and so it's kind of like a domino effect. And so we want to make certain that if we're going to knock the first domino, that we're ready to knock them all down and pay for all of them to be done at the same time.
And I think that was a really thoughtful conversation we had with the mayor in terms of what is our long-term plan and what's our strategy as a community, really, about our aging schools. And it was thoughtful. And I mean, the good news is our mayor is in all of our schools. He's so involved with our students and whatever extracurricular activities he attends. So he sees it. And I think it's important to have those conversations in long-term, midterm and long-term, what are our goals and what are our needs, frankly, and what are the community's ability to pay and their ability, what their tolerance, all those are factors. Those are all things to communicate about and as a community, really.
And to be honest, and I think you, again, not to fast forward conversation, but if you look at the prioritization that Mark put forth in the colored pages at the end, you'll note that they're not large capital items related to the middle schools and high schools, because we don't want to put money in a position or allocate funds and do work that may not be in the direction that the town decides to go, not the Board of Ed even, just the town. So again, that was very deliberate in our approach this year, based on our conversation with the mayor this fall.
Okay, any other questions on that page? Okay, moving on.
Okay, on to page 18. Again, I'm going to look at the last column because there's been some changes and it may create a question or two. The stage lighting for DAG, Moran, Sheehan, and Lyman Hall, the design is complete.
So what page are you on?
Page
18.
18, it's about the
Yep.
8th item from the bottom or so. So that design work has now been complete, and the window replacement design work for Cook Hill, Highland, Lyman Hall, and Parker Farms has also been complete. We are now moving on to the bidding stages. We completed the design work, the documents, the drawings. That's all been submitted to Town Hall Purchasing, and the next step is to get that out on the streets and out to bid. Roxanne?
So I have a question, Mark. I was surprised to see on our strategic, you guys on your strategic plan, item 5 is retail cafeteria at Rock Hill. Okay, fine, 26,000. But yet, here we are at Parker Farms, the cafe for about 26,000 was bondable. I guess my question is, why wouldn't the Rock Hill tile job constitute a bondable project?
That was a new request. All items are strategic plan items at first. That's how we put the information together. And then as we move forward, we move items over that we can handle.
So would you think?
Will most likely be moved to bondable in the future.
Okay, so you think the Rock Hill cafeteria retile will go to, as a bondable item?
Yes.
So I mean, it's 26,000, it's not moving our percentage very far, but is that something, I mean, you guys list that as number 5 as your priority. Can that go? I don't mean go, can we move it to a different bucket? Let me say it correctly. I'm asking, I don't know.
I think we probably can move that.
Okay.
You know, right now, we have quite a few requests in, and this year, obviously, we have close to $10 million worth of bondable items. So
And I respect you can only do so much in a year. I get that, totally get that.
But,
Okay, Mr. Votto?
but if we can't get to that, if it doesn't make the list of bondable things, that has to be done though, doesn't it? Now? Is it that important? I mean, you have it number 5 on here, so I'm assuming it's an important
Well, that's where my
thing.
confusion lied, to
And
be
it is
honest
an
with you.
S for safety?
there are some broken tiles. Right now, it's mainly a maintenance issue. You know, we try to maintain them, but
Is it asbestos?
no.
That was going right.
No.
Stupid question.
I think the
No, it's
point
never a
that
stupid question.
the point that this brings up is the fact that oftentimes the bondable items, while we have great discussion, we have forward movement, it doesn't necessarily propel it as quickly as we would like to see it because of concerns like safety. So I think that yes, we can go back to the mayor and we could get the work together for it to be bondable. But again, sometimes
Does it slow it down? Is it just, I mean, for the 26,000, I'm not, it's such, again, 26,000 is 26,000, but in our budget, we're talking about really a minuscule amount of money. I don't want it to be moved for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I
So
think-
I don't know the answer to that.
we could discuss it further internally, but I think one of the
Okay.
concerns that we've seen, and I think the board has embraced, because a lot of these items ended up usually not coming from the town funds, but either CRA funds, which we know are diminishing, or from the 1%, is that we try to raise the ones that have the greatest concerns. Unfortunately, sometimes we do not look for the bondable piece because we know that that's a whole process.
Right.
And if it's a safety matter, we do
You
raise
just do it internally
Yeah.
and make it go away, if you will.
Un-
Yeah.
unfortunately-
No, I understand that. I'm fine leaving it there. I
Okay.
just was, my initial thought was, well, I certainly know a tile job should last more than 15 to 20 years, so it meets the criteria. And then when I saw Parker Farms, that's confused me. But
No,
I'm
thank
not-
you. I
Don't
appreciate
move it for the sake of moving it. Fine, keep it there if that's what you think is the right place. I just was looking for clarification.
And oftentimes, just the other reason why it goes on here, and it goes back to the CRA funds, and I'm not sure if there is any left, or if there are any left with the town, or if there
Minimal,
are.
yeah.
The mayor usually looks at this, and
Yeah,
when
and
he
he
calls us,
actually pulls
he
those
pulls
items.
those
That-
items
you're
out.
absolutely right about
So
that.
that was, we
That's a
thought
great
even if
point.
there's only a little left,
Yep.
there's a good chance we might get 25,000.
That's very true.
We're
And
trying
you
to-
might get your plow truck too in there.
Well, we know that
pull
that's
those-
not bondable.
Right, I know that, but I'm just saying, to your point, if there is CRA
Exactly.
money, he might yank those out.
Exactly,
Or
because that's
those-
the way he's approached it
Yep,
with us
and
in
that works.
all the years.
Yep,
So, thank you.
thank you.
The lifespan is a good point, because the last 2 tile floors we did not last 20 years.
Really?
But we are changing material. Right now, we're
Okay.
trying to go with a rubberized tile floor that does not require stripping or waxing, which makes us even greener than we are now. That'll save us money in the long run, and I anticipate getting over a 20-year lifespan with these new floors. The initial cost is quite a bit more than the traditional VCT.
Geez, I wish I had tile jobs in my house that didn't live on 20 years, because I want to change them out.
All right, any more questions on page 18? Moving on to page 19. Any questions
Okay.
here?
Ray?
I have a couple on here. The football field and the track. Is that bondable?
No, it's not. The lifespan of turf is no greater than 15 years.
Okay. Now, where are we going to be on the turf?
At Sheehan High School,
Yes.
it's in need right now.
Sure.
Again, that goes back to the facility study.
Right.
Right.
So we would not be talking, it's not slated to be discussed until next year, because of the fact that, again, if we do a facility study, depending on what that turns out, that gives us clear focus and clear vision. And the mayor was very concerned about the bondable issue, which you just heard the answer to that, but secondly, about making sure that we have a clear idea of where we're going in the future.
Because I certainly hope, I don't know if many people have been on that turf lately, but it's becoming a safety issue. Your fellows were out there a couple times with sewing up the rips in it. It's gotten so thin, and I've heard other coaches comment that they're concerned about the safety of the field.
There may be something to that argument, but no matter, we can keep sewing seams and fixing seams.
Yeah.
That's something you have to do with these fields as they age. We can also add infill, which we've done several times. An artificial turf field will always test safer than a real grass field.
Yeah.
We do not have the compaction we have with earth, so when people bring that up, it's not an impact issue, because any grass field will have a much harder surface than an artificial field. Even if the infill was allowed to go for years, it's still softer.
I understand that, but where there's rips in it, I know that on both of the sides of the field where in front of the goal, there's a round circle that's yellow. I was over there the other day, and it wasn't even there anymore. It was sitting over by the track, and I put it back on. Stuff like that, it's just really in sad shape.
Well, it is at the end of its life. There's no doubt about it. And when we initially took that field over, we were supplied with some simple pieces of equipment that we were told would be adequate to maintain it. And those pieces of equipment proved to be not so adequate. It actually was a 16-hour process every week, and it's something that has to be done on off hours. So the cost was astronomical. We then invested in a piece of equipment that allowed us to do it in around 7 hours. So that was a major, reduction in the cost of maintaining that field. But we didn't get that piece of equipment until, I think, 3 years into the life of the field. But it is, it's past
We
due.
lost 6 years by waiting 3.
That's probably true.
Again, there's no question.
We got that in 2009-10, I believe, my first year.
That's your first year here, you got that?
Yeah, I got that because it wasn't being
Who
maintained.
determines who uses that field?
The board did.
Well, there's building use that goes through the school initially. So one of the assistant principals at Sheehan High School gets the request to use the field. They make the initial determination, and then they send it to central office, and we bill appropriately. So it goes out of the school. It goes from the assistant principals at each school. Usually there's an assistant principal at each high school that takes responsibility.
Right, my question is, because it's getting such heavy use from youth football, youth lacrosse, and is there any way to pull some of that out of there?
The challenge is we meet annually with the mayor. Mark's part of those meetings. There's a lot of issues in town because there's just not the fields that there's not the quantity of fields necessary for all the programming. So at that meeting, John Golick is usually there from Park and Rec, as well as other youth leagues. And we try to navigate, but again, the challenge is that there's just not the fields. I know that Park and Rec, working with families and parents, volunteering their time and donating a lot of goods and services, have renovated other fields, they assisted with the baseball field that's at Moran. We're trying to allow fields to rest, and that's always our concern. However, they are town fields. They are community resources, so it's very difficult to shut fields down. We've faced that since day one, and I don't think we're alone in that. I think every district in every state, definitely across Connecticut, there is always a desire to have more activity. So we do work collaboratively, but we also have heard very clearly that these are town resources, and that we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to provide as many hours as possible. But John is very collaborative with us, as well as other people. It's just difficult because there's just not the field space in town for all the fantastic programming that's offered students.
I just am really concerned that now the new field at Lyman Hall, is that taking some of the pressure off the Sheehan fields for like youth football and youth lacrosse?
We have, the thing is that there has been some shifting, not to the extent that I don't think it's been as great as what it could be. However, there is the Vikings, I do know they like to use the Sheehan fields in particular. We reestablished the sound system for them so they can use it at all their games. They just flick an external switch. We don't have to have custodial. We don't charge them for all the custodial. We've worked with them. But with the key thing with the Lyman Hall field is that we have been maintaining it appropriately and properly from day one. So the longevity of that field should be longer, and we're confident that it will be. And we'll have to continue to move forward. But there's always opportunities to look at shifting. But again, we also try to work with the leagues as to where they want to situate themselves. And so we work collaboratively. But that's something we can continue to investigate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other remarks on this page? Mr. Ross?
Yeah, sorry, but my pet project is the senior court lavatories. And I know that we're talking ADA compliant and we're talking about having to tear them down. But I was in there today, and you almost don't want to go in the room. And I noticed there's several other places where they put in for dividers, stall dividers. And basically, if we could fix stall dividers in that without having to go through ADA compliance, that would.
We can't.
The stalls, believe it or not, in there are relatively new. I'd have to take a look to see what's going on, but those bathrooms are so inadequate for the amount of use they get. That's the atmosphere you end up with. There's no way around it. When you put, if you put 1,000 people through this room a day, this is going to be a disaster. It will look nothing like this right now, and that's what happens. To expand those bathrooms, we're either talking about taking senior court, or we're talking about taking a large section of the girls' locker room. There's a ton of structural work involved. There's ADA considerations. So to move forward with, and we've renovated those bathrooms. All the plumbing fixtures are new. There's nothing that hasn't been replaced in the last, 10 years. The plumbing fixtures aren't 10 years old. When those were done, all the stalls I know they were updated. I was involved in the project. The bathrooms have kind of an old-fashioned tile in it, so they don't look presentable, but it's the amount of use they receive. It's not lack of maintenance, although that's been questioned before, but when something's broken, we fix it.
Right, well, there's a couple things in there. One is the bottom of the dividers is all rotted out. And it's been just terrible to look at. And another, for a couple of weeks now, one of the stalls, the toilet seat, a hunk of it, maybe a 2-foot section, has been missing for a couple of weeks now.
So we could check with our building request, because that would come from the principal, and the administration at the school whether or not they put in any work orders. And so we could check on that, and Mark, I'm sure, could follow up, because I know Ms. Duthie and her team are very proactive.
Yeah.
So we could take a look at that and identify if those are areas that we could address. But again, I think that, as I stated earlier, this space, as was just articulated, to do it the right way and not continue to throw good money after bad, it really does require a large-scale renovation of that whole space.
If we could just fix some
Just
cosmetic.
unfortunate.
You know,
It's not gonna.
rather than, because I don't see the 600,000 coming this year or next. And meanwhile, I see a deterioration of the stall walls.
Yeah, the challenge, and again, this is where we run a fine line, we walk a fine line. We could look at some cosmetic changes, but if you change any footprint, and if, the challenge is this was all part of an OCR report that we have to follow. And as soon as you start changing the footprint, or you start changing, not OCR, excuse me,
It is OCR.
oh, it is OCR, when they did the report a few years back, I'm sorry. But you have to look at Office of Civil Rights. So sorry. So you have to, we have to be cautious, because even if you change something out, then they expect you to change everything out. It's not really the most, it doesn't make sense intuitively that you would have to do that, but we have to file a report annually with the Office of Civil Rights to show that we're moving forward. They actually took Google pictures to make sure that we had the handicap parking in the right place. And they went to Google, they took Google satellite pictures, and their pictures weren't taken at the right time. And the parking was put in place, so Mark actually had to meet with the people, show them the physical spaces, because we had said that we completed it. So it's there's a lot of, it's a whole nother layer of reporting, and you want to be cautious that you're not, again, making yourself susceptible to additional expenses. And it's really challenging, but we'll look into those, especially the toilet seat, as you just mentioned, and I'm sure Ms. Duthie has already been on it, and we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, anything that's broken, we normally replace. If there's a work order in, it gets replaced. Maybe there's nothing in for that yet. I don't know when it broke, but I'll stop there tomorrow and I'll take a look at it myself.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Purcell, you had a question? Oh, you don't have a question? Okay. Moving on to what page are we on, 20?
20.
Any questions on this page?
Here.
Okay, page 21.
Okay, the explanation for the Goal 1 safety guidelines, these are normally things that we're being told we have to do by either a state or a federal agency. And that's why sometimes they'll end up, like the one item that ended up in this year's budget because of the fact that there is a tripping hazard. But typically these things are items that one way or another we're being mandated to do.
So why don't we just, instead of going through each one, if there are any questions on Goal 1?
On that page, yeah.
No.
Okay.
22?
Goal 2, which is not eligible for bonding. So again, looking at pages 22 through page 26, if there are questions.
Nope.
Sometimes we get a question about why can't we lump a bunch of these projects together to make a bigger bondable project. We can, and we do that. But the one thing that we need to keep in mind is when we combine projects, especially from different schools, the specifications get extremely complicated, and they're no longer something that we can write in-house or even manage in-house. Those projects end up needing a design team to facilitate them.
On page 26, replace scoreboard Riccatelli Field. Is there a problem with the current scoreboard?
Other than it's aging, I'm not sure if they've had any electrical issues, but that was something that the athletic department in the school requested.
And that's not in this budget year.
No, it's
No.
not.
No.
1920.
Okay, page 27, any questions? I think, we've had adequate time to look at a lot of these pages. And
agreed.
everyone's gone through their budget book and asked their
Right.
questions, so this is kind of a cursory look again for
Yep.
one more time through. 28? '29?
I want to mention on 29, because there were some questions posed by staff members, and I forgot to mention this in my Monday message today about furniture. Again, this is reviewed by the building principal in conjunction often with staff within the school. We wish we could accommodate everyone's needs, but again, this is just actually new to our budget over the last 3 to 4 years, where we've allocated some furniture money, or tried to allocate furniture money, so we're doing the best we can. But again, it's really looking at the district as a whole picture. We would love to be able to allocate several thousand per building, but it's just not possible.
Page 30. And that is the end of facilities. On to technology. Mrs. Vate.
So goal 3 is the only one that has any costs associated with it. The highlights include to continue to fund the computer replacement plan. We've made great strides in this in the last few years and gotten most of our equipment to less than a 5-year replacement cycle. We did creep up a little bit to the 5-year with teacher laptops, student devices, and 6 years with computer lab equipment this year. But we are continually monitoring less expensive alternatives, such as replacing labs with Chromebook equipment and things like that. We're also looking to replace old aging smart boards at our middle schools that are more than 10 years old. Continue to fund the Chromebooks for universal access. This is the high schools and middle schools that we presented on earlier. Update network servers. And these are the security servers, so in order to add any more security cameras, we do need to replace these. They're more than 6 years old. And the digital records storage. And we would be going out to bid for a digital record storage system in order to electronically store our paper records, so.
Okay, Mrs. Corso.
Will that digital record storage be a yearly reoccurring cost?
So at this time, we anticipate there would be some kind of recurring costs. However, we really are at the initial stages, so we would have to go out to bid. And usually it's a purchase of a software package, hopefully using existing equipment. And then there's usually some type of maintenance fee, but it's much smaller than the original purchase.
Thank you.
The service we're looking at is, just for clarification, because I did get this question, so I'm glad you brought this up too, is that it's not where we're looking. The initial would be to get some assistance in helping get some initial files on board, but then it would be training staff to onboard the other files or upload the other files.
So I know we are required to keep certain files for 50 years. So are those going to be uploaded and then we get that space back? Because that's a big space saving in each school also by converting everything digitally. And time, when somebody
Correct.
calls who's 20 years out of high school looking for their transcript, instead of digging through files
Correct.
that could be in a storage place.
This obviously came up through a lean opportunity with our administrators to discuss this at central office. So this was one of our lean events, our Kaizen events that we started as a central office team last year. Our first and primary location would be looking at our special ed records, to be honest, because we have a whole room of special ed records. So we'd start there and then go to other areas as well as business. We've already transitioned our business records, a lot of them already being scanned in. So we've really downsized our file cabinet storage. My office, we pretty much have downsized significantly. We virtually don't use paper. We scan most of it, if not all of it. And so but I think special ed, and I don't want to speak for Ms. Klemaszewski, but I know special ed is a huge area that we could use that. And then you're right, absolutely. You're
Space saving.
100% correct. So that's our goal.
Mrs. Castelli?
So I have two questions. And Karen, you know I'm a proponent of anything technology-wise. My concern is, do we know for sure there's a need for a one-to-one Chromebooks at the high school? In other words, because so many of our high school kids already have access to some way of using technology, do we need to do a one-to-one? That's just a question.
So this, as you know, we've been talking about this for a while. We did a presentation on it to the board a few months ago, and really looking at, they're about 50%, the high schools right now.
Yep.
So it varies between the two high schools, but about, around 50% of Chromebooks now. So teachers still don't have access when they want to use them. They're just not accessible to every classroom.
Okay, so we are definitely
Right.
seeing a need to increase that.
Right.
Okay.
And the other thing is there is an additional cost every time. Our model right now is buying Chromebooks, buying carts to store them in. So it's not fully accessible to the building, depending upon where you're teaching. And eventually that becomes a more expensive model, because if you're buying one for every room, you're ending up buying more than the population in the high school.
Right.
So there is a break-even kind of point.
That's a
So-
good point, good point. And my other question is with respect to the digital record storage. Is that $75,000 the cost of hiring someone to do that? What's that $75,000 represent?
So it's really just a placeholder until we do a little bit more research and go out to bid or write bid specs.
Yeah, when we had been approached last year, because we had been doing the Kaizen event, we had been approached by a couple of companies, and we did some initial investigation to get us set up with the right system, the right process, some initial scanning to get us started. And really the range at that time was, we basically looked at the middle of the range and provided that as a placeholder, as Karen said. We would have to go out to competitive bid. We want to do some research on what we'd be looking for. But we felt that, again, based on the fact that it does provide, as Ms. Corso said, it provides space, it provides efficiency, clerical time, all of those different things. When an administrator is by him or herself and has to pull something up, it's a lot easier to do that. So right now it's a placeholder based on what we heard last year from a variety of vendors that we reached out to.
Okay, so you answered my question. I think that we're not planning to do this in-house with resources. We are going to do this with some company that specializes in
Initially,
digital.
they specialize it, but then they train us how to use what they
Right,
specialize in.
But they're going to do the transition.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
thanks.
typically, just from the demos I've seen in the past, records are indexed in multiple ways also. So not just by the student name, there might be, the case manager or other records associated with that paper file. So you have the ability to access that information much easier.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Mrs. McKay, you had a question?
Yeah, so minus the storage, because I put that in a different compartment than the actual purchasing of Chromebooks, teacher laptops, that kind of thing, which we've traditionally funded through either our 1% account or unencumbered funds. So this is a little bit of a departure to see that, ranked so low, I should say, on your strategic plan. They came up as items 7, 8.
Well, actually, they've always come up on the strategic plan priority. It's
And
just
did
that
we just fund them through?
We've pulled them off prior to going to the mayor
Okay.
because at that point in the year, we've had, in the previous
We had a
years.
sense that, but
We've
I
had-
know we've earmarked quite a bit, like 700,000-800,000 for special ed if need be.
That was last year, so that's been
Correct.
untouchable. So this
Right.
year, the present analysis and forecast is
It's
very
just-
low.
That's what I was wondering.
So that's
where I'm
why-
going with this conversation. Is that why we're shifting?
Well, I think that's why we won't shift them off of here.
Fair enough. Okay, that's
And,
that.
and last year, there was only 50,000.
Right, that's my
Right.
point. I didn't know the exact dollar amount,
Yep.
but I know traditionally we don't see this
Correct.
much. And that was, I wanted some of it for new board members, but also for TV
Absolutely.
Land or whatever, that's a shift for us. So
Thank
that
you.
speaks to how we see how lean this budget is this year, that our unencumbered really isn't there, and our 1% probably will not, be
I mean,
available.
things change, obviously,
I know,
second half of the year.
I know, it's still early,
things
and
change,
the
yes.
heating season is a big variable, and
Last
it's been
month was
cold.
tough.
Right, it's been cold. I understand, I understand all that. That is a little bit of a shift for us. Okay.
Any other questions on this page with technology? All right, now we're going to move on to see next steps. Now, just revisiting some of the things that we've talked about this evening. Let's go back to project choice. And what is the desire of the board with regard to that? Do we want to explore that further? Do we feel it's beneficial or not? We need to give direction to the administration with regard to where we want to go with that. So, do we want to take consensus on moving forward to look at project choice or not? So, are there any comments?
So here's where I stand right now with this. Because of the March 1st deadline, I don't want to be rushed into making a decision about this, and maybe it's best to look at it for the following year, not this budget, but maybe next budget. I don't know. I'm a little concerned about moving forward without really having a chance to think about all of the pros and cons.
Any other remarks? Mrs. Raccio?
I think I would be more inclined to look at tuition at WIMS and TEMS, because that would be a fixed number as opposed to open choice. We don't really know the students that we would be getting, and right now, with the special ed situation that we've had and the need, we anticipate another 100, just in our district, another 100 special ed students next year. We don't know where that's going to put us, and that could cause the need for more interventionists, more math interventionists, literacy. We saw what the results were from literacy last fall when the principals came in front of us with the climate improvement plans, and I just think it's a lot to take on right now.
Other remarks? So, we can take consensus if we would like to move forward on exploring more information about project choice or not. All right? So,
Can you specify for this budget year?
for this budget year.
So to explore, is that what you're saying?
Well, unless someone else would like to reword what, we need to give the administration
And
direction.
when you say explore, clarify what does that mean?
Yeah, I need to understand.
All right, we
'Cause-
need to give direction to our administration as to, do we want to pursue this or don't we?
Well, I
for
guess
this
that
year?
in terms of, if I may offer, because this is it's a tough one, because I know in your hearts you want to do this because it's the right thing to do as a community and as you know, really moving our district forward in terms of continuing to embrace diversity. I think one of the things that I could offer, and not to prolong the conversation or interject too much, but I could offer looking at certain classes at certain schools that are low, but would still remain within our guidelines that were established by the board, and look at what's reasonable. We know that sometimes in our district, we don't tend to see in one school 20 kids come to one grade. That doesn't happen. It's unrealistic, because it means a whole neighborhood probably turned over in one fell swoop. So I wouldn't mind. We'd be fine with sharing with you some of that information. I'm not saying there's just going to be a tremendous amount of students that we could offer this opportunity to if we look at it through that lens, but at least if you wanted that data, because to Mrs. Costelli's point, it's just difficult though, because what is the right time to consider this? So I'd be happy to pull that together. I could do that for Wednesday night if you'd like. So I'm offering that. It's up to you.
Mr. Votto, did you want to say something?
How many students do we have now?
Open choice?
Yeah.
Six.
Would it be easier if we just said increase it by X amount, a number? To
Well,
give you
we-
a number?
Well, the thing is that what I could do is come back with where I feel we could add, and I'll show you what the numbers are presently. If we add 2 students, where does that bring us? How much closer to our number? And I could give you those locations. I'll be very truthful in looking at this briefly over the weekend and today. Well, maybe not so briefly, but looking at it closely, there's not many places that you could add a lot of students. There are probably 3 or 4 places you could add a few students, and that might be, a step in the right direction.
Right.
So if you don't mind, I could bring that forward to you, as I mentioned much earlier in the evening, just to have another
That's 'cause we're
conversation.
talking just elementary you're talking?
Elementary, middle school.
Mrs. McKay?
Yeah, I know I'm the one that kind of started this whole conversation.
It's okay.
Sorry. But, I kind of agree with Kathy. The more I process this, I kind of feel like I want to see how the state reacts. What does it look like for this first year of change for reimbursement for special ed students? I'd almost be of the mind of I would almost wait a year and let's see how it plays out for this first year and how the state handles it. I appreciate, Sal, your offer. I really do. You're trying to accommodate us. I hate to make extra work already for you guys. I know you're here to serve us. I appreciate that. The more I processed it, I'm with you, Kathy. I think it's an opportunity down the road, but I think right now, and knowing that March 1st, it's so quick. Maybe if we had this discussion in October or February, and I'm not, October, November, excuse me. And again, I'm not criticizing that you should, that's not my point. But the gift of time to look at things. And I would be fine with letting it go for now, and maybe it's something we can look at for a year from now. That would be my way of thinking. But if you want to do the numbers, go for it. But I'm good.
Mrs. Caselli?
Thank you, Roxanne, for your support.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Kathy.
But if you want to, if the consensus is for you to move forward with the information, I know you would do this, but I just want to state it. You have to make sure that we not only consider the grade that they're entering into, but each year as those kids move through the system, are there going to be pockets where we now have to hire another teacher? Because we're exceeding our
Yeah, I think that's a tough one because it's so volatile. I think that's a tough, we could do the best within a range, but I think once you get past 3 to 4 years, then the numbers become challenging to project out.
Mrs. Purcell?
I also want to ask where those kids going, which schools they're going to. Are they going to schools that we're already recommending to put social workers in because we need to take care of our situation? And are we adding another potential, students that may need that extra service?
Again, I think that the reality is that all of our elementary schools could use additional support. So I think the answer to your question is yes and yes.
Mrs. Corso?
So Open Choice is a program that we already have in our district, and we welcomed Open Choice students for a reason. And I don't think that reason has changed, why we would welcome them in. So in terms of data and where we can put them without significantly increasing our costs, I think that would be really helpful. So I don't want to make more work for you either, but
And as I
think
said, I could tell you, we've already looked at this, so it's not about the work. So please, this is not about us. I could give that to you with very little additional effort.
And what grade are our current Open Choice students?
They're all in high school.
They're all
so,
in high school.
Yeah.
So they're all graduating, or they're filtered throughout high school?
I think this is the last year. Hold on one second. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is the last year.
Seniors?
Yeah, we have, I believe there's a total, there's the 6 students. I'll confirm, but I believe they're all seniors. I believe they all graduate this year.
Well, knowing that we're a very welcoming community, and we certainly want this opportunity for our students, but we certainly want to be mindful of implementing it in the proper way and making sure we have enough time to look at this. What is the board's pleasure on the consensus for this? Did we want to move forward and get some additional information, or do we think perhaps this might not be the best thing for this particular year and maybe look for the information next year? So yes would be you would like the information now, and maybe no would be kind of maybe for next year. So starting with Mrs. McKay.
No for next year.
So you would want the information for next year?
Well, I don't need it
Yes.
now, but I mean, yeah, I would I guess I'd have a reopener for next year for a
Okay.
discussion, but for now, I would say no.
Okay.
If that,
Mr. Reynolds?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
I'm gonna say yes.
I'll say yes.
so what's, I don't even know what the vote is.
5 noes and 4 yeses.
Okay, so
Wait till next year.
we'll look at it next year as an opportunity. All right, a couple of the other things that came up, is it the board's pleasure that we want to look at the strategic plan and come to consensus on putting 4 rather than 3 social workers for our number 1 priority on the strategic plan? Is that something we want to discuss and look at?
Yeah,
So, do we want to take consensus on that?
sure.
Make it, change the 3 to 4.
Change the 3 to 4.
I just have a question. Was that, we were going to do that because we could take that other one off? Is that why, or we're just changing? So should we discuss the other part first?
We probably should discuss the other part first, because I think that's how Ms. McKay brought it
Okay,
up, was the
so-
fact that if we use the grant funding to cover the
Right.
additional expense
That
of those
was-
other 2
right.
positions,
Okay.
then this opened up that, and
All
then
right,
there was a
then
lot
let's,
of
because that was the
positivity to
next thing
that.
on my list is,
Yes, to start with the grant.
all right, we'll start with
no, with-
consensus
on the
on the
coordinator.
grant, on using the grant
Grant
money
money, yeah.
to fund the Science and Technology Curriculum Coordinator and the Global Communication Curriculum Coordinator.
And Ms. Latour has,
I do want to let you know that the cost of that is $51,182.
okay, so
I
it is the-
confirmed the numbers and looked at the wrong column, so
So
I apologize.
51,
$51,182.
And that's an
Thank you.
increase in the current, the people that are in those positions currently, that's the difference between their salaries and a first-year administrator salary.
for
It's
next year.
step 1 of the curriculum coordinator salary, yes.
So will those positions be reposted?
Correct.
It'll go through the whole personnel
Correct.
process?
Correct.
Because it's a change
So
of position.
can that potential cost change if somebody different is hired, who comes in at a more experience, et cetera, et cetera?
It could,
Potentially.
And is that covered by the grant, the change in cost?
it'd be the slightest difference, because actually it would be about a $6,000 difference
yeah,
the most.
we absorb that.
Any more questions on this particular change? So we'll start with Mrs. McKay.
So give me the question again, so I know what I'm.
The question will be, shall we fund through grants those 2 positions, which are listed as our number 2 combined priority, which is the Science and Technology Curriculum Coordinator and the Global Communication Curriculum Coordinator?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 And yes.
That was easy.
Okay,
Thank
that
you.
was easy, that's 9-0.
All
We
right.
like those.
Now we can move back to the other question, which is, do we feel that we want to change that 3 social workers / psychologists, whatever is decided, to 4, which is the number 1 priority on our strategic plan priority list? Do we need any clarification on that? So changing 3 to 4.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 And yes.
That was easy also. 9-0 on that one. Okay. There was one other item, which was the college and career
Yes.
specialist.
So the college and career specialist, that had been brought up previously when we were reviewing the sustained budget. And when discussing this, this is what the item that Mrs. Corso brought up. What's the board's pleasure on this? Did we want to entertain the idea of going to one full-time college and career counselor?
I have a question. Why do we have to decide this tonight?
You know.
We don't. I'm asking, do we want to take consensus? It's possible consensus. Do we want to do this, or do we want to think about it?
No.
Are you
Or-
talking
or-
2 to 1 or just having them at all?
I'm asking the pleasure of the board.
Well, it could be just my pleasure then, right?
No, it's the pleasure of the consensus of the board.
I don't know why we're doing this tonight.
I'm asking what is, those two
Personally,
things.
I would rather hold off on this particular
that's
one.
fine.
I think there's, I need to sleep on this one.
All right, that's fine. Is that
fine.
the feeling of the other board members, that they'd like to think that over? And,
I'd also like to hold off, since it's not presented on the strategic plan. I'd like to address those items first.
okay. So we'll hold off on that. Were there any other
No,
considerations?
I guess the question is, do we want to, do we want to, I don't know what you're nodding. I think the question was, I guess the question now, I was going to say, do you want to look at the strategic plan priorities prior to leaving tonight while they're in, or can we leave you with the assignment that you do review those closely, now that you've heard all aspects of the budget? And if we could start there on Wednesday?
That's fine.
And my goal, as I put in my memo to all of you on Friday, is if we could come as close to some resolution to 1% by Wednesday, after 2.5 hours more of deliberation, that would be good, because then we could put, some wheels in motion. If not, we do have another date. I just want to remind everybody, scheduled tentatively for Wednesday, February 7th. And then that really has to be it, because you have to take consensus at the operations meeting on the 12th.
So can I just ask a clarifying question about, because we've jockeyed some stuff around in your top 10. Just to clarify, the school resource officer, is that out, or that's out, right?
out.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I thought.
And just for new board members, there have been times when another board member will bring up that they feel that an item is of such importance that they feel that it should be brought up on the strategic plan list. So, but come prepared to know where your priorities might be, and what percentage you feel that you could support as an increase.
And what we'll do is, of course, we'll make those adjustments based on tonight's work on the priority sheet, and we'll have that active spreadsheet available to us, so that if you say you want to move something, we could tell you, well, now the new percentage is this, the new percentage is that. So we'll work in those areas and go from there.
Yeah, so actually, your percentages are going to change anyway.
Exactly. So we'll start with a new percentage. We won't print out a fancy piece,
That's fine.
but we'll start with a new percentage
Yeah,
for
just
you.
in black and white's fine.
Yep.
Did you say the 12th, we're going to have an operations meeting to?
You have to take consensus that night,
On
because
the-
then,
on the
yeah,
budget.
because then
Right.
Tony and Dominic have to put the document together for the board meeting, so that it goes to the mayor. We have a short turnaround this year, because our board meeting is on the 26th. So we have to get it to the mayor's office with the transmittal and everything.
Are there any comments from the public? No comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, I declare that this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your attention.